The traveler had left Moon Lake many nights ago, though the soft glow of its lanterns still shimmered in the corners of his mind. He had carried peace with him like a fragile flame, tucked carefully in his heart. But as the seasons turned, he began to feel a quiet pull once more, a whisper distant yet familiar, calling him beyond the hills. Now, under a velvet sky brushed with starlight, he walked a narrow path that wound through the valley of mist. The air smelled faintly of rain and wild jasmine, cool and soothing as it brushed against his skin. Crickets sang softly in the grass, their rhythm steady and patient, as if guiding him forward. The moon hung low tonight, an amber crescent floating over the horizon, and beneath its gentle light, he saw it, a valley unlike any other. It was vast and open, surrounded by silver cliffs that shimmered faintly under the stars. But what caught his breath were the flowers. Thousands of them, scattered like constellations upon the earth, each one glowing faintly with its own light. He stopped, awe washing over him. The flowers pulsed in slow rhythm, as if breathing with the night itself. Their glow wasn't steady. It flickered softly like candlelight seen through silk. Blue, lavender, gold, colors shifting with the wind, blending into one another in an endless waltz of light. He stepped closer, his boots barely making a sound on the soft ground. The petals were delicate, almost translucent, yet they glowed from within. When he reached out and brushed one gently, the flower quivered and gave off a faint hum, a sound so soft he wondered if he had imagined it. He knelt down and whispered to himself, "A garden of stars." A faint wind stirred, carrying a scent unlike anything he'd ever known. It was sweet, but not like any flower from his world. It smelled like forgotten dreams, like the air just before dawn, the promise of something sacred and hidden. He moved deeper into the valley, the fields stretching endlessly around him. The light of the glowing flowers danced on his face, painting his skin with warmth and shadow. For a moment he forgot everything, time, distance, even the world itself. It was as if he had stepped into the heavens. Somewhere far off, a soft chime rang out, like the ringing of crystal against water. He turned toward the sound, his heart quickening. The flowers seemed to part before him, revealing a narrow path lined with silver vines. The vines shimmered faintly, wrapping around old stones that marked the way forward. As he followed the path, he noticed the air growing cooler. The mist thickened slightly, swirling around his ankles, and the stars above began to pulse in harmony with the flowers below. Each light seemed to breathe in rhythm, as though the sky and earth shared one heartbeat. He paused and looked up. The stars felt closer here, bright enough to touch. They weren't silent either. If he listened carefully, he could almost hear a murmur, a faint whisper carried on the wind. Words too soft to understand, but gentle enough to stir the soul. He closed his eyes. The whisper felt like it was speaking not to his ears, but to something deeper, something that remembered. He breathed in, slow and steady. When he opened his eyes again, the valley looked somehow alive, more vivid, more aware. It was as if the land itself was waiting. At the center of the valley stood an ancient stone archway. Its pillars were entwined with the same glowing vines, but these shimmered brighter, their light pulsing in golden tones. And just beyond the arch, he could see a faint, flickering glow, like a lantern hidden behind a curtain of mist. He approached carefully, his steps quiet. Each movement made the flowers around him sway, releasing soft motes of light that drifted lazily into the air like fireflies. The ground beneath him felt warm, humming faintly with energy. When he reached the archway, he stopped. Symbols, old, elegant, and half-faded, were carved into the stone. He traced one with his fingers. It felt smooth and cool. The instant he touched it, the symbol flared softly, glowing with pale blue light. The traveler pulled his hand back in surprise, watching as the glow spread slowly across the archway, awakening the vines that clung to it. They began to shimmer brighter and brighter until the entire structure glowed softly against the dark sky. Then the whisper returned, louder this time, clearer. It came not from the wind nor from the earth, but from everywhere, around him, above him, within him. Welcome, Dream Keeper. The traveler's heart skipped. The voice was neither male nor female. It was gentle, timeless, and filled with warmth. He took a step back, glancing around, but saw no one. The valley remained still, the flowers swaying peacefully. "Who speaks?" he whispered. But there was no answer, only a soft melodic hum that seemed to vibrate through his chest. The flowers glowed brighter for a moment, then slowly dimmed again, returning to their gentle rhythm. He stood in silence, unsure whether to move forward or retreat. Yet something deep inside urged him on. He had followed whispers before, and they had always led him somewhere meaningful. He took a deep breath, stepped beneath the glowing archway, and crossed into the heart of the valley. Beyond the arch, the air felt different, lighter, as if it carried music only his soul could hear. The mist here shimmered faintly, swirling with starlight. The flowers were taller and glowed brighter, their petals brushing softly against his hands as he walked. And then, ahead of him, he saw it. A single flower stood apart from the rest, tall, silver, and radiant. It glowed with light so pure it seemed to spill into the air like liquid moonlight. Its petals were open, and at its heart shimmered something that wasn't a seed, but a tiny star, alive and pulsing. He knelt before it, breath caught in wonder. The soft hum he had heard earlier now came from this bloom. It resonated through the ground, through his bones, through his heart. Without thinking, he whispered, "The midnight bloom." The flower's glow brightened as if it had heard him. For a moment, the entire valley seemed to exhale. The stars above shimmered in perfect harmony, and for the first time since leaving Moon Lake, the traveler felt something stir deep within, something ancient and kind. He smiled faintly. Whatever this place was, it was waiting for him. The whispers faded into silence, and the night stood perfectly still. And there, in the quiet heart of the valley, under 1,000 watching stars, the traveler sat beside the glowing flower, his heart calm once more. The journey had begun again. The night was deep and still. The traveler sat by the luminous flower, the midnight bloom, watching its silvery petals sway gently in the cool breeze. The light that radiated from it wasn't harsh or bright, but soft, like moonlight diffused through clouds. It pulsed slowly, in rhythm with his breath, and he felt his heartbeat slow to match it. He had been walking for days before finding this valley, but now, there was no desire to move at all. Every sound here felt alive, yet peaceful. The hum of the petals, the sigh of the mist, the distant murmur of water trickling through unseen roots. He leaned back on the mossy ground, gazing up at the stars. They glowed brighter now, closer somehow, as though bending down to listen. The air shimmered faintly, carrying with it a scent of sweet earth and dew. The traveler closed his eyes. For the first time in a long while, he felt as though the world itself were breathing beside him. Then, faintly, so faintly that he first mistook it for the sound of the wind. He heard a whisper, "Alien!" His eyes opened. The sound faded instantly. He pushed himself up, glancing around the quiet valley. The flowers around him swayed as if stirred by some invisible hand, their light flickering gently. He waited, still and silent. Then it came again, closer, clearer. "Alien!" The voice was soft, melodic, and hauntingly familiar. It spoke his name as if it had been waiting a lifetime to say it. He stood slowly, heart steady but curious. "Who's there?" he asked softly, his voice blending into the whispering air. Only silence answered him, but the flowers seemed to glow a little brighter. He stepped closer to the midnight bloom, staring into its center. The tiny star within it pulsed faster now, its rhythm echoing the beating in his chest. He reached out and brushed a finger across one of its glowing petals. Instantly, the air around him shimmered. The sound of the wind grew distant, muffled, replaced by a soft chorus of overlapping whispers. It was as if the garden had begun to speak. The voices were countless, overlapping like waves against the shore. He couldn't make out the words at first, but each sound carried emotion. Longing, peace, sorrow, joy, a tapestry of memories woven into the hum of the night. He knelt down, his hand trembling slightly as he touched the petal again. This time, a single voice rose above the rest. "Alien, we have waited for you." The traveler froze. The sound wasn't frightening. It was tender, almost loving, like the echo of a dream long forgotten. He swallowed, whispering, "Waited for me? Who are you?" The glow from the flower brightened, and suddenly, his vision shifted. The valley blurred at the edges, the mist thickening until it became luminous, almost liquid. Within that mist, faint shapes appeared, silhouettes of people, transparent and radiant, like fragments of starlight shaped into form. They stood among the flowers, gazing at him with eyes that shimmered softly, filled with peace. One of them, a woman with long hair that flowed like smoke, stepped forward. Her voice echoed inside his mind, not through sound but through feeling. "We are the dreams that found rest here," she said. "The garden keeps us. The flowers remember." Elian's breath caught. "The flowers remember." She nodded, her smile faint and kind. "Every bloom holds a dream, a whisper of a soul that once wandered seeking peace. When a heart lets go of its burden, it becomes a star seed. We plant them here. They bloom when the soul has healed." Her hand moved, brushing over a nearby flower. It glowed brighter, releasing a faint sigh that shimmered through the air. Elian looked around. The garden, once silent, now felt alive in an entirely new way. The whispers weren't random, they were stories, memories, lives. He heard a child's laughter ripple through the air, a mother's lullaby, a soft murmur of prayers whispered to the night. It was like standing inside 1,000 dreams, each one glowing faintly beneath the petals. He felt something stir in his chest, a warmth that wasn't entirely his own. "Why do they call my name?" he asked quietly. The woman tilted her head, her eyes glowing softly. "Because your dream has not yet bloomed." He frowned slightly. "My dream? You carry it within you," she said, stepping closer. "It followed you from the Lake of Lanterns, across the sleeping valleys. You think you came here by chance, but the garden called you. It remembered your light." Elian's gaze drifted down to the midnight bloom. The star within it pulsed in time with his heartbeat. He realized then that this flower, this single bloom among thousands, was somehow connected to him. "Is this mine?" he asked softly. The woman nodded. "It is the beginning of your rest." For a long moment he said nothing. The night wrapped around him, and the whispers softened into a calm hum once more. He crouched down beside the flower again, watching it breathe. Each pulse seemed to draw the stars closer, the air warmer. When he reached out again, this time he didn't hesitate. As his fingers brushed the petals, a gentle warmth spread up his arm, through his chest and into his mind. The world seemed to dissolve, not vanish, but blur into something softer, quieter. He saw flashes, moments from his life that had long faded. His first lantern at Moon Lake drifting into the sky. The face of a friend he once lost. The feeling of standing in the rain, laughing for no reason. And through it all, the voice whispered, calm and certain, "You are safe here. Rest, Dreamkeeper. The garden knows your name." He felt tears slip down his cheeks without realizing. They weren't of sorrow but release. The whispers faded again, returning to silence. The vision of the ghostly figures dissolved into starlight that drifted gently upward, becoming part of the endless sky. Elian opened his eyes. He was alone once more, but the valley glowed brighter than before. The flowers pulsed softly, like hearts beating in the soil. He exhaled long and slow, letting the peace sink into him. Then, faintly, one last whisper brushed against his ear, so soft it felt like breath. "Follow the path of silver vines. The garden is not done with you yet." He lifted his gaze. At the far edge of the valley, beyond the glowing blooms, he saw them, thin, shining trails of silver weaving through the mist, leading toward a faint light deeper within the garden. He smiled quietly to himself. "Then I'll follow," he murmured. And with that, the traveler rose once more, his heart steady and his spirit calm, as the voices beneath the petals hummed softly behind him, a lullaby of forgotten dreams guiding him toward the next mystery. The silver paths shimmered faintly beneath the traveler's boots, curling through the soft mist like streams of moonlight caught upon the ground. The garden around him was hushed now, as if holding its breath. The whispers beneath the petals had quieted to a gentle hum, guiding him forward. Elian walked slowly, each step sinking lightly into the moss-covered earth. His hand brushed against flowers glowing softly blue, pink, and gold, all breathing with life, their faint warmth tingling against his fingertips. Above, the stars drifted lazily in the night sky, but their reflection in the blooms made it seem as though he were walking through the heavens themselves. The voice from before, the one that had called his name, still lingered faintly in his heart. "Follow the path of silver vines," it had said. And so he did. As he walked, he noticed the air growing cooler, the mist thicker, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and something ancient, stone perhaps, or time itself. The silver vines grew denser, weaving over roots and small rocks, glowing brighter with each step. Soon the path curved upward, leading to a rise overlooking the rest of the valley. And there, half veiled in mist and moonlight, he saw it. Gate. It stood tall and graceful, though its frame was covered entirely in intertwining vines of silver. Each vine shimmered faintly, alive with soft pulses of light that rippled like breath. The gate looked ancient, older than the garden, older perhaps than the stars above it. And yet it did not feel abandoned, it felt awake. Elian approached slowly, drawn by its quiet beauty. The vines swayed as he came closer, curling slightly as if sensing his presence. The air hummed softly. He stopped just a few steps away, gazing up at the delicate archway. Its shape was strange. Circular, not rectangular, as though it were never meant to separate one side from another, but rather to join them. "Is this the heart of the garden?" he whispered. A faint breeze stirred, carrying with it the scent of blooming flowers and something else. Memory. He reached out. As his fingers brushed the silver vines, a warmth spread across his palm, neither hot nor cold, just alive. The vines pulsed brighter, threads of light winding beneath their surface like flowing water. Then faintly a voice spoke again, not from behind him nor from the air around, but from within the vines themselves. "The dreamer has come." Elian's breath caught. He took a step back, eyes wide. The voice was deep and calm, like an echo rising from the roots of the earth. It was not one voice, but many, layered together, ancient and patient. He looked up at the gate again, now glowing brighter than before. The vines shifted, curling tighter, as though awakening after centuries of slumber. "Who are you?" Elian asked softly. "We are the memory of the garden," the voice replied. "The keepers of its promise." Elian's brow furrowed. "Promise?" The vines stirred, their silver glow turning momentarily golden. He felt a vibration beneath his feet, deep, resonant, like the heartbeat of the land itself. "Long before the stars scattered across the sky," the voice continued, "this garden was a bridge between waking and dream. Those who lost their light came here to rest, and their dreams became seeds. The promise was simple: no dream shall fade while hope remembers." Elian stood silently, the weight of those words pressing gently upon his heart. The voice softened. "You carry light, dreamer, light long separated from its place. It brought you here, seeking return." He looked down at his hands. The faint glow from the midnight bloom still lingered on his fingertips from when he had touched it. It pulsed softly, the same rhythm as the vines before him. "What do I do?" he whispered. "The gate opens for those who remember." Elian frowned slightly, unsure. "Remember what?" "Your beginning," came the reply. He closed his eyes. First there was only silence. Then, faintly, images began to surface. A younger version of himself, walking through a field of lanterns by Moon Lake. The soft glow of light drifting into the sky. A promise whispered to the stars. "I will find peace." He remembered the sound of his own laughter, the face of someone beside him, a friend, a sister. Their smile fading into memory as time pulled him away. The image flickered, fading into darkness. "I don't remember everything," he said softly, pain lacing his voice. "You remember enough." The vines shifted again, their glow rippling outward like a wave. The gate trembled, not violently, but as if sighing in relief. Slowly, the circular frame began to open, the silver threads unwinding gracefully like ribbons caught in wind. Behind the gate, a soft light bloomed, not harsh but gentle and vast, like the glow of dawn reflected on still water. Elian stepped closer, peering through the opening. Beyond, he saw what looked like another garden, larger, brighter. The flowers there were unlike any he had seen, translucent, their petals like fragments of pure starlight. And in the center of that garden was a pool, calm, mirror-like, reflecting not the sky, but the galaxies themselves. His breath caught in wonder. The voice spoke again, softer now, almost like a lullaby. "This is the inner garden, where dreams are born anew. Few have walked its paths. Fewer still have returned. Elian hesitated, one hand resting against the edge of the gate. The vines were warm beneath his fingers. "And if I go through, then you will see the truth of your dream." He looked down at the path behind him, the valley glowing softly in the moonlight, the flowers whispering their ancient songs. It all felt sacred, safe. But something within him, something small, persistent and bright, urged him forward. "I've come this far," he said softly, almost to himself. "I can't stop now." The vines pulsed once more, brighter, as if approving. He stepped through the gate. At once the world shifted. The sound of the wind vanished, replaced by a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The ground beneath him shimmered, each step leaving faint ripples of light, like walking across a pond made of stars. The flowers here were alive with motion, their petals unfurling in slow, graceful dances, each one releasing motes of silver dust that drifted upward like tiny comets. The air tasted sweet, almost luminous. And there, in the center of it all, was the pool, vast and perfectly still. It reflected the cosmos, but when Elian leaned closer, he realized it also reflected his dreams. Faces, moments, hopes he'd thought he'd lost. He knelt by the water's edge, feeling the cool glow brush against his skin. From behind him, the voice of the gate faded into a whisper. "Remember, dreamer, the garden does not take, it returns." The light shimmered across the surface of the pool, and Elian gazed down at his reflection, at once himself and yet surrounded by stars. He smiled faintly, heart steady, breath slow. The garden of stars waited, patient and eternal, as another dream took its first step toward awakening. The stillness of the inner garden felt unlike anything Elian had ever known. It wasn't the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of understanding, of something alive yet infinitely gentle. The air shimmered faintly with silver motes of starlight, drifting like slow snow through the dim glow. The traveler stood motionless at the edge of the mirrored pool, its surface a liquid sky, reflecting galaxies that shifted softly with each breath he took. He felt the world breathing with him. Every inhale filled his chest with cool light. Every exhale carried away the weight of forgotten years. The path behind him, the gate of silver vines, had faded into mist. Only the garden stretched before him now, endless and alive, its luminous flowers opening one by one as if greeting him. He took a hesitant step forward. The ground glowed beneath his boots, rippling softly. Somewhere in the distance, he thought he heard humming, a low, wordless melody that trembled with warmth. He followed the sound. The path wound between tall flowers shaped like stars caught in bloom. Each petal shimmered with faint images. Dreams, perhaps, glimpses of lives that weren't his. A child laughing beneath a willow tree. A woman releasing a lantern over the sea. An old man holding the hand of someone unseen. The flowers hummed faintly as he passed, their voices blending into the same song that drew him deeper. At the heart of the garden stood a small cottage. It looked impossibly old, its walls woven from vines and bark, its roof blanketed with moss that glowed faintly green. The light from the flowers cast slow-moving reflections on its wooden frame, making it look alive, breathing. The door was already open. Elian hesitated, listening. The humming came from within, soft, steady, filled with care. He stepped inside. The interior was warm. Shelves lined the walls, filled with glass orbs that glowed softly, each one pulsing with a different hue. Some were golden, some pale blue, others tinged with faint rose or lavender. They floated lightly above their stands, suspended in slow motion, like dreams that had forgotten gravity. And there, sitting by a wooden table, was a woman. Her hair was white as frost and fell down her back like soft clouds. Her eyes were half closed as she hummed, her wrinkled hands carefully tending to a glowing flower resting in a small bowl of starlit water. The bloom pulsed with faint light, a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of ages and the gentleness of rain. "I wondered when you would arrive," she said without looking up. Elian blinked, startled. You know me." A small smile touched her lips. "I know your light." She finally looked up, and her gaze met his. Her eyes were not any one color. They shimmered like the stars reflected in the pool outside. "Every dream that finds its way here has a keeper. And every keeper knows when a new one enters the garden." He took a slow step closer. "You're the caretaker." She nodded. "Of dreams, yes. Of wishes, memories, and fragments of souls that the world forgets." Her hand brushed gently over the petals of the flower in the bowl. It responded, its light growing a little stronger. "This one," she murmured, "belongs to a child who wished to see her mother again. Every night, her dream drifts through the stars and lands here, where it rests until it is ready to bloom again." Elian's throat tightened. "That's beautiful. And sad." "Dreams are both," she said softly. "They are the only things strong enough to survive sorrow and still glow." She motioned for him to sit. He hesitated for a moment before lowering himself onto a small cushion beside her table. The faint hum of the orbs surrounded them, a quiet symphony of sleeping hearts. The caretaker continued her work, trimming a leaf here, pouring a few drops of silver water there. Her movements were slow, deliberate, almost ritualistic. Elian finally asked, "Why do I feel like I've been here before?" The woman didn't look up. "Because you have." He frowned. "I don't remember." Her eyes softened. "You wouldn't. No one remembers the garden until they need it. You were here long ago as a boy. You came carrying a single tear and a wish you didn't understand." Elian's mind stirred. He tried to reach for the memory, but it danced just out of reach. "What did I wish for?" She smiled faintly. "Peace. The kind that doesn't end when you wake." He looked around the glowing room, the thousands of orbs pulsing in rhythm. "And these?" he asked. "All human dreams." "Yes," she said. "Every soul sends something here when it dreams deeply enough. The garden keeps them safe. Some fade and return to the stars. Others take root and bloom into light. But yours," she paused, setting down her tools. "Yours has been waiting." He felt his heart quicken. Waiting? For what? The caretaker stood, her robes whispering softly as she crossed the room. She reached one of the shelves and carefully lifted an orb that glowed with faint gold. Inside it swirled soft light, like a storm of memory. She brought it to him. "For you." Elian took it carefully into his hands. The glass was warm, almost alive. Images flickered within. The shore of Moon Lake, the floating lanterns, a promise whispered into the wind. He gasped softly. "I remember this." The caretaker nodded. "Your dream never left. Grew roots here. The garden does not forget what the dreamer cannot recall." He stared into the orb, mesmerized. "Then why am I here now?" "To see it bloom," she said simply. "You planted this wish long ago, but it could only blossom when you were ready to listen." The words sank deep into him. Quiet, heavy, true. Outside, the wind shifted. 1,000 petals rustled, carrying a sound like distant lullabies. The cottage lights flickered gently in rhythm. Elian looked up. And what happens when it blooms? The caretaker smiled, a smile that seemed older than time. When a dream blooms, it returns to the one who made it, not as memory but as peace. He nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. The caretaker reached for her lantern, lighting it with a spark from one of the silver vines curling near the window. "Come," she said. "There is something you must see." They stepped outside together. The garden stretched endlessly beneath the stars, every flower glowing brighter than before. The night breeze carried whispers, not haunting now but kind. She pointed toward the mirrored pool. "That is where all dreams return. When yours is ready, you'll release it there." Elian looked at the orb still glowing in his hands. Its light seemed to beat in rhythm with his heart. He turned to her. "Will I see you again?" The caretaker smiled softly. "I am in every whisper of the garden. When you listen, you will find me." And with that, she turned back toward her cottage, the glow of her lantern fading slowly into the mist. Elian stood alone once more, surrounded by light. The orb in his hand pulsed gently, as though breathing, alive, waiting, patient. He gazed at it in silence. For the first time in years, he didn't feel lost. He felt home. The garden breathed around him, alive with whispers and shimmering petals, and the stars above shone just a little brighter. The night was alive with quiet light. Elian stood by the mirrored pool long after the caretaker had returned to her cottage. The orb she had given him rested in his hands, warm and breathing softly with a pulse that matched the slow rhythm of his heart. Around him, the garden shimmered with motion, petals opening and closing as though the flowers were sighing in their sleep. The stars above seemed closer than ever, hanging heavy and low, their reflections glimmering in the calm surface of the pool. He turned the orb slowly, watching the light inside swirl like golden mist. Each turn revealed a different memory. Laughter, loss, wandering, all blending into one soft glow. The words of the caretaker echoed in his mind. When a dream blooms, it returns to the one who made it. He didn't know what that meant entirely. Not yet. But something in him was beginning to awaken. A quiet, glowing understanding that had no need for words. Then, from behind him, came the faint sound of footsteps brushing over the moss. "You're still here," came the familiar, gentle voice. Elian turned. The caretaker stood near the path, her lantern glowing faintly blue, its light dancing across the silver vines at her feet. She looked softer in the night, smaller almost, but her eyes still shimmered with that quiet infinity that seemed to know all things. "I couldn't leave," Elian said. "Not yet. The garden feels alive, like it's listening." "It is," she said simply. "It always is." She stepped closer, her robes whispering like wind through reeds. "You've held your dream long enough. It's time you planted it." He blinked, confused. "Planted it?" She smiled, and the lantern light deepened in color, soft violet now. Every flower here began as a seed of light, a fallen star. When a soul sends out a wish so true that even the heavens hear it, a star falls. That light lands here, in the soil of dreams. But it cannot bloom until it's planted by the one who remembers why it fell. Elian frowned slightly, turning the orb in his hands again. "So this is my star." The caretaker nodded. "Your wish took form long ago. It wandered the sky, waiting for you to return. Tonight, it will find its home. The thought stirred something inside him, all mixed with a strange ache. He looked down at the orb, watching the light swirl brighter as though it too had heard her words. "How do I plant it?" "Follow me," she said, turning toward the deeper part of the garden. The path they walked shimmered beneath their feet, lined with flowers that bowed slightly as they passed, their petals releasing tiny sparks that drifted upward like fireflies. The air was warm and filled with a scent both sweet and distant, the scent of old memories. They stopped at a small clearing. The ground there glowed faintly blue, covered in moss and dotted with sleeping blooms. At its center stood a single tree, slender, silver-barked, with leaves that shimmered faintly like tiny mirrors. The branches curved upward, touching the air as if reaching for starlight. "This is the heart tree," the caretaker said. "It is the oldest part of the garden. Every dream planted here draws its life from the stars through its roots." Elian looked up in wonder. The tree was silent, yet he could feel its pulse, faint but steady like the beating of the world's own heart. The caretaker motioned to the ground. "Kneel. Hold your dream in both hands." He did as she said, lowering himself onto the glowing moss. The earth felt warm beneath his knees, almost like skin. He placed the orb gently in his palms, its light now soft and steady. "Now," she said, her voice a whisper, "close your eyes." He obeyed. "Remember not with your mind," she said, "but with your heart. The wish that created this light, call it back." Elian took a slow breath. For a moment there was only darkness. Then, faintly, images began to flicker. A younger version of himself, standing by a lake of lanterns, his reflection mingling with starlight. A promise whispered into the wind. "I will find peace." The voice of a woman laughing beside him. His sister, maybe. He couldn't remember her face clearly, but the sound of her laughter filled his chest with warmth. He remembered losing her, remembered the silence that followed, and how for years he had wandered, carrying that emptiness like a shadow. And then, the light. The first dream. The wish that someday he would find a place where the pain stopped echoing. A single tear slipped down his cheek. The orb pulsed once, gently, as if responding. The caretaker's voice came again, soft as a breeze. "Now place it in the soil. Let the earth remember what your heart has released." Elian opened his eyes. The world seemed brighter now, glowing softly through the tears. He pressed the orb into the moss. The ground yielded easily, welcoming it. As soon as it touched the soil, the light flared, bright and pure, a slow bloom of gold spreading outward in quiet ripples. The earth shone. A sound rose, like 1,000 sighs of relief. Petals drifted from the heart tree, glowing as they fell. The orb sank deeper until it vanished beneath the surface. And then, from that very spot, a tiny sprout of light appeared. It grew quickly, unfurling into a stem, then into leaves of liquid silver. The bloom that followed was small, delicate, its petals shimmering with the same golden glow as the orb had held. It trembled faintly in the air, breathing. Elian watched in silence, unable to speak. The caretaker placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Every dream becomes a star seed. When you planted yours, it remembered its purpose, and so did you." He nodded slowly, still staring at the bloom. "It's beautiful. It's alive," she said. "It will glow for as long as you carry peace in your heart. And if ever that peace fades, it will call you back." He looked up at her. "Back to the garden." She smiled, her eyes soft and endless. Back to yourself. For a long time neither spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of the earth and the soft fluttering of glowing petals in the air. Finally, Elian whispered, "And all these other flowers? All of them are dreams like mine?" "Yes," she said. "Every bloom is a promise kept, a wish remembered. Together, they light the darkness between stars." Elian stood slowly, gazing out at the endless garden, each flower glowing in its own hue, each one carrying a story, a dream, a heartbeat. It felt as if the entire world were breathing around him. The caretaker turned toward the path. "Come," she said. "The night is still young, and there is more to see. You have only just begun to listen to what the stars are saying." Elian took one last look at his glowing bloom, small but steady, its light mingling with the others. He smiled faintly, feeling lighter than he had in years. As he followed her back through the shimmering paths, he heard the garden whisper, not in words but in feeling, a gentle, endless peace. And somewhere above them, a star flickered softly in the heavens, as if answering the garden below. The garden had grown quiet again. The ripples of light from Elian's newly planted bloom faded gently into the soil, until all that remained was a soft golden pulse, steady and slow, the rhythm of a heartbeat within the earth. Elian sat back on his heels, staring at the glowing flower. Its petals trembled faintly, as though breathing. Around him, the star garden swayed with the night breeze, the glow of the blossoms shimmering in endless waves. For a long time he simply breathed. The air was thick with warmth and the faint scent of starlight. Every exhale seemed to loosen something inside him, knots of memory, of sorrow, of the long, endless wandering that had carried him to this place. He looked toward the caretaker who stood by the heart tree, her lantern dimmed to a faint violet glow. She seemed to be watching the stars through the branches above. "Elian," she said softly without turning. "Do you feel it?" He paused, uncertain. "Feel what?" "The stillness," she murmured. "The peace that grows after a dream is planted. It is not silence, but something deeper, the moment before a new song begins." He closed his eyes, and for the first time in a very long while, there were no echoes of the road behind him, no restless yearning, no voices of what he had lost. There was only the quiet rhythm of his breath, and the faint hum of the garden's life. "Yes," he whispered. "I feel it." The caretaker smiled faintly. "Then the garden has accepted your dream." "But," he hesitated, "I still don't know what the dream was. I didn't wish for anything." "Not really." She turned to face him then, her silver hair glowing like frost in moonlight. "Not all dreams are made with words. Some are born from longing, from what the heart cannot name. When you placed your star seed, it remembered what your mind forgot." He frowned slightly, glancing back at the bloom. "So this dream, will it show itself?" "In time," she said. "When you are ready to see it." The wind moved through the vines above, making them shimmer like strands of liquid glass. Somewhere far off, a nightbird sang a slow, low note that lingered in the air like a memory. Elian rose slowly, brushing the moss from his hands. "It's strange," he said. "I feel lighter, as if something I was carrying isn't mine anymore." The caretaker's smile deepened, kind and knowing. "When you plant a dream, you release its weight. The garden keeps it safe. It doesn't take it away. It simply helps you remember that not all burdens must be carried alone." She turned, motioning for him to follow. "Come. There is a place by the reflecting pond. It's where new dreamers rest. He followed her through the winding paths, his footsteps soundless on the soft moss. The stars above shimmered brighter now, their reflections caught in every dewdrop, in every petal that glowed along the path. The deeper they walked, the more the air seemed to hum, not loudly, but like the whisper of unseen music. When they reached the pond, Elian stopped in awe. The surface of the water was smooth as glass, reflecting the entire sky. Thousands of stars twinkling upon its mirrored skin. The flowers surrounding it were pure white, their petals translucent, glowing faintly with silver light. "This is the mirror of dreams," said the caretaker. "Every soul who has planted their seed may come here and see the reflection of what they carry within." Elian knelt beside the pond and gazed into it. At first, he saw only his reflection. Tired eyes, wind-burned skin, the faint lines of long years of travel. But as the water rippled softly, the reflection shifted. Now he saw himself as a boy, laughing by a riverbank, chasing fireflies. He saw his sister, her hair braided with flowers, her smile bright enough to rival the sun. He saw the moment he had promised her he would find a place where dreams never faded. And then he saw the night she was gone, the lantern he had lit for her, floating away on the water, carrying all that he could not say. Elian's breath caught. The water shimmered again, and the image faded. He sat back, his hands trembling slightly. That was years ago. How could it? "The garden remembers what you do not," said the caretaker quietly. "It holds the truth of every dream ever whispered beneath the stars, even the ones forgotten." Elian bowed his head. "So my star seed, it was for her." The caretaker's voice softened further. "Perhaps, or perhaps it was for the part of you that never stopped searching for peace after she was gone. Grief and love are threads of the same light, Elian. When one burns too long, the other flickers dim. But when you plant your sorrow as a seed, both begin to glow again." He didn't answer. He couldn't. The words sank deep into him, gentle as rain. The calm he had felt before returned, stronger now. Not empty, not numb, but whole. He breathed slowly, watching the pond. The stars above seemed to shift, and for a brief, fleeting second, he thought he saw one of them fall, a tiny golden streak tracing the darkness. "Another dream is being born," the caretaker said softly, following his gaze. "Tonight, someone else somewhere in the world has wished deeply enough to touch the stars. And now their dream will grow here too." Elian smiled faintly. "Then this garden never stops growing." "Never," she said. "As long as there are hearts that dream." A hush fell again. Not silence, but that gentle stillness she had spoken of before. The air felt sacred, like the pause between breaths. Elian turned toward her. "What about you? Have you ever planted a seed?" The caretaker's smile faltered, just slightly. Her eyes turned distant, reflective. "Long ago," she said. "Before I became what I am now." "What was your dream?" he asked gently. She didn't answer at once. Her gaze drifted toward the water. "To keep every other dream alive," she whispered at last. "To make sure none were ever lost again." Something in her voice ached with centuries of tenderness and loneliness. Elian wanted to ask more, but something in her expression told him not to. Instead, he simply said, "You've done well." The caretaker looked at him, and this time her smile was real, deep, luminous, carrying the weight of lifetimes. "And now so have you." The wind rose, carrying with it the faint hum of the garden's song. The flowers swayed gently, their glow weaving in patterns like constellations being rewritten. Elian closed his eyes, listening. He could feel the hum through his body, the steady pulse of the soil, the rhythm of the roots, the quiet peace that lingered in the air. His star seed was there beneath the ground, glowing softly in the earth's heart. And though he could not see it, he knew it was growing, slowly, silently, patiently, like hope. When he finally opened his eyes again, the world seemed softer, brighter. The edges of the stars glowed with the faintest gold, and the night no longer felt heavy. For the first time in many years, Elian smiled. The caretaker lifted her lantern. "Come," she said softly. "There's still much to see before dawn." As they walked away, the reflection of his glowing bloom shimmered faintly across the pond, a single golden star pulsing among 1,000 others. And though Elian did not yet know it, that dream, his dream, would soon begin to awaken. The night had deepened into a velvet quiet. Even the wind had stilled, as if the entire valley were holding its breath. Only the faint shimmer of the blossoms moved, their light rising and falling in slow rhythm, like the steady pulse of a sleeping world. Elian lay upon the moss near the reflecting pond, the silver lantern of the caretaker flickering softly beside him. Above, the constellations shone with crystal clarity, and the soft scent of the glowing flowers surrounded him like a lullaby. Sleep tugged gently at his mind, but something in the air kept him awake. There was a hum, soft, barely audible, yet it vibrated through his chest, threading through the earth beneath him. It was not just the garden breathing. It was the garden speaking. At first, he thought it was the wind teasing the petals. But as he listened closer, the sounds began to form shapes, syllables, almost words. 1,000 tiny voices overlapping, whispering from the blooms, from the vines, from the still pond itself. "Elian!" He opened his eyes. The sound of his name was faint, but unmistakable. He sat up slowly. "Who's there?" he murmured. The caretaker was gone, her lantern light no longer visible across the paths. Only the garden remained, shimmering in soft waves of silver and blue. "Elian!" The voice came again, this time from a patch of flowers nearby, a cluster of star-white blooms, their centers glowing faintly gold. He moved closer, kneeling before them. "Are you speaking to me?" The blossoms swayed gently, though there was no breeze. And then, from somewhere deep within the sound, a whisper emerged, like a memory half remembered. "Do not be afraid. We are the echoes of dreams." Elian froze. "Echoes? Dreams never die," the voice continued, layered and melodic. "They live here in the soil, in the stars. We remember those who planted us." He reached out a trembling hand, brushing a petal with his fingertip. The moment he did, warmth flooded through him, a soft pulse that traveled up his arm into his chest. Images flashed behind his closed eyes. A young woman laughing beneath a sky full of meteors, a child pressing a tiny glowing seed into the ground, an old man smiling as he watched his dream bloom beside the lake. Each vision flickered like candlelight, gentle, incomplete, but filled with emotion so pure that tears welled in Elian's eyes. When the images faded, the whispers grew louder, overlapping into 1,000 different voices. He could hear them all, fragments of lives, snatches of wishes, the murmur of love, hope, regret. "I wish to see her smile once more. Let my child dream without fear. Let my heart be still." It was overwhelming, beautiful but almost too much to bear. The garden was alive not only with flowers, but with memory itself, each bloom carrying the soul of a dreamer who had once stood where he did. He pressed a hand to his chest, breathing slowly. "So every flower is a story." "Yes," the garden whispered. "And now yours grows among us." His throat tightened. "What do you remember of me?" The voices softened, the 1,000 tones fading to one. It was the same gentle voice that had first spoken. "We remember your promise. We remember the lantern that drifted away on a lonely river. We remember your sister's laughter, and the light that would not fade." Elian's breath hitched. "You know about her." "We know what the stars know," they replied. "Your dream is bound to hers. When you planted your seed, the garden remembered her too." He bowed his head. For a moment silence returned, the kind that hums between heartbeats. Then the flowers near him began to glow brighter, their petals opening wider until their golden centers pulsed like tiny suns. A breeze stirred. The scent of the blossoms deepened, rich and sweet, carrying whispers across the valley like the echo of distant lullabies. He heard laughter then, faint, familiar. His heart leapt. It was her. "Ilara," he whispered. The laughter faded, replaced by a voice. Not the many voices of the garden, but one soft and clear, like the sound of a bell in still water. "Brother!" Elian froze. "Ilara!" The air shimmered before him, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw her. A faint outline made of starlight, her hair flowing like silver smoke, her eyes gentle and bright. "You found it," she said. "The place where dreams sleep." His eyes filled with tears. "I looked for so long," he whispered. "I thought I'd never find you again." "You never lost me," she said softly. "Every dream you carried was a lantern, and every lantern led you here." Her image wavered, fading like mist in dawn. "Don't go," he said, reaching out, his hand passing through the light. "I'm not going," her voice murmured, now coming from everywhere at once. "I am part of the garden now. I am in every whisper, every bloom. When the wind moves, I am near." The light faded completely, leaving only the soft glow of the flowers. Elian sat very still. His heart was trembling, but his body felt weightless, unburdened. The garden had not just whispered stories. It had spoken to him, offered him something deeper than memory. Connection. He lay back on the moss, staring up at the stars, the echoes still humming in his ears. "Sleep, dreamer," the garden murmured. "The night remembers you." He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he did not dream of wandering roads or distant faces. Instead, he dreamed of glowing petals drifting through the night, each carrying a voice, a memory, a fragment of light, all returning to the stars from which they came. When Elian awoke, the horizon was still dark, but the stars were beginning to fade. The whispers had grown faint, but he could still feel them. A soft vibration beneath the earth, a heartbeat beneath his own. He rose quietly, brushing dew from his hands, and looked out over the garden. Each flower glowed with gentle warmth, like thousands of tiny souls resting in peace. And in the farthest corner he saw it. His own bloom brighter than before, its golden light flickering softly alive. A voice, not spoken but felt, brushed his mind. "The garden has accepted you, Elian. You are one of its stories now." He smiled faintly, the morning air cool on his face. "Then let it remember me kindly," he whispered. "Let it remember that I found peace." As the first pale blush of dawn crept across the sky, the star garden glowed brighter for a moment. every flower pulsing in unison as if in reply. And from somewhere deep within, the whispers returned, soft and serene. "We remember, dreamer. Always." When dawn finally began to stir above the valley, the star garden still shimmered faintly, resisting the coming day. The night's whispers lingered in the air, soft as breath, echoing through the vines and petals. Elian stood where he had fallen asleep, the moss cool beneath his bare feet. The memory of the garden's voice still drifted through his thoughts, the murmured "we remember," dreamer resonating like a lullaby inside him. The horizon was pale silver, streaked with violet and rose. Morning dew glittered like stars fallen to the ground. The world felt hushed, as if the garden itself were waiting. Then he saw it, a single petal drifting through the still air. It glowed softly, pulsing with golden light. It moved without wind, gliding in slow circles until it brushed against his hand, leaving behind a faint warmth that tingled through his skin. Elian looked up. More petals were falling now, luminous and weightless, floating in a loose trail across the mossy path that wound deeper into the heart of the garden. Path made of light. He hesitated only for a moment before following. Each step he took stirred the air with quiet magic. The petals seemed to react to his presence, brightening slightly when he neared them, dimming once he passed. They led him through a corridor of towering vines that swayed gently, their surfaces shimmering with pale luminescence like threads of moonlight. The air was different here, thicker, almost humming. There was no sound of birds, no rustle of creatures. Only the faint vibration beneath everything, like the soft thrum of a heartbeat hidden within the world itself. As he walked, he began to notice faint shapes within the petals, tiny flickers, as if each one held a fragment of light alive inside it. When he leaned closer, he saw images, faces, smiles, hands outstretched toward the sky. Dreams, memories. They were alive, tiny echoes drifting through the air. The farther he went, the stronger the hum became, until he could feel it deep in his chest. It wasn't frightening. It was warm, familiar, like being surrounded by the heartbeat of something ancient and kind. He whispered almost without thinking, "Is this where you lead me?" And though no voice replied, the petals brightened as if in answer. The trail wound downward into a glade where the light grew softer, more golden. The flowers here were unlike any he had seen, vast blossoms of crystal blue petals that opened and closed with slow rhythm, breathing in harmony with the earth. Between them, small streams of silver water trickled across stones that glowed faintly from within. It was a world suspended between night and dawn, untouched by time. He stopped to watch the water. It moved without ripples, smooth as silk, and reflected the sky perfectly. When he peered closer, he saw not his own reflection, but 1,000 fragments of starlight drifting beneath the surface, like a river of dreams flowing silently beneath the world. He reached down, fingers trembling, and touched the water. Warmth spread up his arm instantly, and then came the visions. He saw the caretaker long ago, before her hair had turned silver, standing where he now stood. Her hands were cupped around a glowing seed, her eyes filled with tears. She whispered words he couldn't quite hear, and placed the seed in the water. It drifted away, glowing softly, until it disappeared into the silver current. Then another vision, a boy with a wooden flute, playing beneath a rain of petals, a woman kneeling in prayer beside a sleeping child, an old man setting down a lantern and smiling as his reflection shimmered beside it. Each image passed through him like wind, gentle and wordless, but carrying emotion, love, loss, peace, hope. When the visions faded, the hum of the garden filled his ears again. He whispered, "This is the path of their dreams, the path of every seed that was ever planted." A voice, not loud but clear and familiar, spoke behind him. "You're beginning to understand." He turned. The caretaker stood at the edge of the clearing, her lantern in hand, though its light was barely visible in the golden glow around them. "I wondered when you'd find this place," she said, walking closer. Her expression was calm, but her eyes shone with something deeper. Reverence, perhaps even pride. "Few ever do. The path of light appears only when the garden chooses to reveal it." Elian looked around, still awed. "What is it?" "The heart of the garden," she said softly. "Every petal, every seed, every memory ever planted flows here. The light you see beneath the water, those are dreams, carried along by the current, guiding one another toward the stars." He gazed back at the silver stream. "Then this path connects them all?" "Yes," she said. "It is the thread that binds every soul who ever dreamed here. Each flower blooms for a time, fades, and returns to this current, joining the eternal flow. Nothing is truly lost." He watched the petals drift past his feet, glowing softly as they floated downstream. "So even those who are gone, they are never gone," the caretaker finished. "Only changed. Their dreams continue, carried by others. Sometimes when the garden feels a deep longing, it calls to those who still walk the earth, those whose hearts echo the dreams that remain unfinished. Perhaps that is why it called to you." Elian turned toward her slowly. "Because of Ilara?" Her expression softened. "Yes, your sister's dream still glows among the roots of the heart tree. When you planted your seed, the garden remembered hers. The two are now intertwined, as they were always meant to be." He felt tears sting his eyes, but they were not heavy tears of grief. They were light, full of understanding. He whispered, "Then she's still here." The caretaker nodded. "Everywhere the light touches." For a long while they stood in silence, watching the glowing stream. The petals continued to drift, slow and graceful, forming gentle spirals as they passed. Then, as Elian looked down again, he noticed something new. A petal, brighter than the rest, had landed on the water beside him. It glowed golden, pulsing with warmth. He recognized the light instantly. His flower. His dream. He knelt, his reflection mingling with the light, and watched as the petal drifted toward the current. For a moment it hovered there, and then with a faint shimmer joined the flow, merging with the river of dreams. The garden's hum deepened, resonant and melodic, like the sound of 1,000 heartbeats aligning. The caretaker smiled faintly. "Your dream has entered the stream. It will travel the path now, finding those who need its light." He nodded, unable to speak. The moment felt sacred, eternal. Then, from somewhere far ahead, a glow appeared, brighter than any flower, like the dawn itself rising from the depths of the garden. The caretaker lifted her lantern slightly. "Come," she said. "The path continues." Elian looked once more at the golden river beneath his feet, then followed her, his heart lighter than ever before. Behind him, the petals drifted onward, their glow reflecting in the water like a million tiny suns. And from the distance came the faintest whisper, not of sorrow or longing, but of gratitude. "Thank you, dreamer. You have kept the light alive." As the words faded, the garden's hum grew softer, blending with the morning air. And Elian knew, the journey was far from over. The garden still had more to show him. The golden glow from the path faded behind them, replaced by a hush that felt sacred. Elian followed the caretaker deeper into the garden, where the vines grew taller and the air shimmered with a faint silver mist. The hum of magic was softer here, as if the garden itself was holding its breath. They walked in silence for a while, their steps soundless on the moss. Overhead, threads of starlight wove between the branches like glowing cobwebs, trembling as they passed. At last the caretaker stopped. Before them stretched a small clearing surrounded by low, pale blue flowers that opened and closed like sighs. At its center lay a pond, perfectly circular, still as glass, and glowing faintly beneath the mist. It wasn't like the silver river from before. This water didn't flow. It didn't ripple. Simply was. A stillness so pure, so complete that it almost seemed alive. The caretaker's voice was a whisper. "This is the mirror pond." Elian stepped closer. "Why does it not reflect the sky?" "Because it reflects what lies beneath the surface," she said. "Not of water, but of the soul." He crouched beside the pond, gazing into it. At first, he saw nothing, only a smooth, endless depth, dark and silent. But then the mist began to shift, curling over the water's edge, and images began to form. At first faint shapes, colors, movements, then clearer, until he realized what he was seeing. His childhood home. The pond shimmered, and there it was, the cottage on the hill, the fields stretching wide beneath the summer sun. The laughter of children echoed softly. His laughter, and beside him a little girl with bright eyes and tangled hair. "Ilara!" He whispered her name like a prayer. The image sharpened. Ilara chasing a butterfly, her laughter ringing through the grass. He saw himself running after her, tripping, falling, both of them collapsing in a fit of giggles. The scene was so vivid he almost expected to feel the sunlight on his skin. He reached toward the surface, but as his fingertips brushed the water, ripples spread through the image, distorting the memory into fragments. When it cleared again, the scene had changed. He saw a winter night. Snow falling outside the window, his parents sitting by the fire, and himself, older now, clutching a book tightly while Ilara leaned against him, half asleep. He remembered that night. The stories he used to tell her before she went to sleep. Stories of starlight gardens and travelers who carried dreams across the night sky. He had forgotten that until now. The caretaker watched silently from behind him. The pond shifted again. Now he saw the night of the storm, the one that had changed everything. He saw himself running through the rain, shouting Ilara's name, his lantern flickering weakly in the wind. He saw the swollen river, the shattered bridge. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. The water trembled. The image froze. Ilara on the far side of the river, calling to him, her voice lost in the storm. Then the light went out. Elian's breath caught. His reflection blurred. Tears fell, rippling across the pond's surface. The caretaker's voice came softly through the stillness. "The pond shows what was lost, not to wound but to remind." He wiped his eyes. "Remind me of what?" "That even pain has roots in love," she said. "And love leaves echoes that never fade." He closed his eyes, breathing deeply. The garden hummed faintly around him, a low, soothing sound. Slowly he opened his eyes again and saw something new. The pond was glowing brighter now. And this time, the reflection wasn't of the past. He saw himself standing in the garden as he was now, but behind him, where the caretaker stood in reality, There were dozens of glowing figures. Some he recognized, some he didn't. Faces of people he had met on his travels. Faces of those who had shared moments of kindness, sorrow, laughter. And among them one shone brightest, Ilara. She stood there, smiling, her hair like threads of starlight, her eyes calm and knowing. "Ilara," he whispered again, his heart trembling. She didn't speak. But as he watched, her reflection stepped closer to his, until their images nearly touched. The pond shimmered, and a warm glow spread across his chest, the same warmth he'd felt when he planted his star seed. In that instant he understood. She had never been gone. She had always been part of him, in his memories, in his dreams, in the very seed he'd planted. The garden hadn't brought him here to find her again. It had brought him here to remember her fully, without the weight of loss. The caretaker's lantern flickered behind him, its light casting soft halos across the mist. "She has always been part of your dream," the caretaker said quietly. "Just as you are part of hers." The garden merely gave her voice a place to rest. Elian smiled faintly, tears glistening in his eyes. "Then she can see me still." "She can feel you," the caretaker replied. "Every time you remember with love, she blooms a little brighter in the starlight." The pond began to dim, its images fading into gentle light once more. The mist thickened, wrapping around them like silk. Elian sat for a long while beside the water, letting the peace of it sink into him. He thought of all the memories he had buried beneath the years, not just of Ilara, but of the kindness of strangers, the small moments of wonder he'd once overlooked. When he finally stood, the caretaker's eyes met his. "What do I do now?" he asked. She lifted her lantern, its flame steady and golden. "Now you carry what you've seen," she said. "Not as burden but as light. The garden does not ask us to forget our pain. It asks us to understand it." Elian looked back at the pond one last time. Its surface had returned to stillness, a perfect mirror once again. But this time when he looked into it, he saw his reflection clearly. His face, calm and luminous beneath the starlight. And for the first time in many years he smiled. The caretaker turned toward the misty path ahead. "Come," she said softly. "There's one more place you must see, the celestial archway. It waits for those who have remembered." As they walked away, the pond shimmered faintly behind them, its light dancing across the flowers. The whispers of the garden rose once more, gentle as a lullaby. And among those whispers, he thought he heard Ilara's voice. Soft, distant, full of love. "Keep walking, brother. The stars are waiting." Elian smiled through his tears. The mist swallowed the clearing, and the glow of the pond faded into dream light. But its warmth, her warmth, remained, glowing quietly within his heart. He followed the caretaker, the garden's hum surrounding him like a heartbeat, guiding him onward through the endless night of stars. The mist deepened as Elian followed the caretaker along the narrow path. The air had changed, softer, thicker, filled with the scent of night jasmine and something else. Something wistful. It wasn't sadness, not exactly, but the ache that comes when you remember something beautiful you thought you'd lost. The caretaker's lantern flickered as they walked, its golden light dancing across the petals that lined the path. Each flower they passed seemed to bow slightly, as though greeting an old friend. After what felt like an eternity wrapped in silence, the path opened into a vast glade. Elian stopped, breath caught in wonder. Before him stretched an ocean of light. Thousands upon thousands of glowing blooms spread across the ground like fallen stars. The valley shimmered under their soft radiance, turning the air itself to silver dust. Above, the night sky mirrored the field perfectly, as if earth and heaven had folded into one. "This," the caretaker said softly, "is the garden's heart." Elian stepped closer, the light brushing against his robes like silk. "They're endless," he whispered. The caretaker nodded, her eyes glowing faintly in the lantern light. "Each one holds a story, a wish once whispered into the night." He turned to her. "A wish?" "Yes," she said. "Every flower in this garden blooms from a wish that was never fulfilled." Her words hung in the air, fragile and haunting. Elian knelt beside one of the flowers. It was a pale gold, its petals translucent, trembling faintly as though breathing. The closer he leaned, the more he thought he could hear something, a faint hum, a melody woven from distant dreams. He closed his eyes and listened. In that hum he heard laughter, a voice, soft, trembling, whispering a name, promise unfinished, then silence. He opened his eyes again. Whose wish was this? The caretaker joined him, lowering herself slowly beside the bloom. "A young woman's," she said. "Long ago. She wished for her love to return from the sea. He never did. When she passed, her sorrow rose into the night, and the stars caught it. One fell here, and this flower grew." Elian stared at the petals, his throat tightening. "So, each flower is born from a sorrow?" "Yes," she said. "But not sorrow alone. It is born from the courage to wish, even when the world will not grant it." He thought of the faces he had seen in the mirror pond, the people he'd loved, the dreams he'd buried beneath the years. How many wishes had he let fade because he thought they no longer mattered? The caretaker stood and gestured for him to follow. "Come. There's more to see." They walked between the glowing fields. As they passed, the flowers seemed to stir awake, opening wider, their colors deepening. Blues, silvers, faint violets that shimmered with a ghostly beauty. The air filled with whispers, countless voices blending together like the sigh of wind through the stars. "What are they saying?" Elian asked quietly. "They are remembering," she replied. "Every night, the wishes sing their stories back to the stars. It is how the sky learns what the world still hopes for." Her words struck something deep within him. He stopped walking, listening more closely. The voices seemed clearer now. Not words but feelings. He heard longing, hope, regret, gratitude, all tangled together, fragile yet endless. And then, he heard one voice rise above the rest. "Elian!" His heart skipped. It was soft, distant but unmistakable. "Ilara!" he whispered. The caretaker paused but said nothing. Elian turned slowly in the direction of the voice. A trail of white flowers glowed brighter than the rest, forming a path that curved toward a small rise at the far end of the glade. Without thinking, he followed. The whispers grew softer but clearer as he walked. With each step, the air grew cooler, sweeter. At the crest of the rise, he found a single tree, ancient, silver-barked, its branches heavy with star-shaped blossoms. Beneath it stood a single flower, brighter than all others. It was white, pure, radiant, and trembling gently as if alive. He knelt beside it, his breath catching in his throat. The flower pulsed with a faint rhythm, slow, steady, like a heartbeat. He reached out, brushing a petal with trembling fingers. In that moment, a wave of memory flooded through him. Laughter, warmth, sunlight on a river, Ilara's small hand in his. He gasped softly. The caretaker's voice floated to him, calm and tender. Some wishes are so strong they do not fade. They return again and again, blooming in every age. Elian's hand shook. This is hers. The caretaker nodded. She wished before she was lost, that you would one day find peace. That wish was never forgotten. He looked down at the flower, tears spilling freely. She wanted me to stop carrying the guilt. Yes, the caretaker said. Her love became a wish. The wish became light. And the light took root here. Elian bowed his head. The flower's glow reflected in his tears, making them look like stars. He had traveled so far, searching for something he couldn't name, and here it was, blooming quietly in the dark, waiting for him to see it. He whispered softly, "Thank you, Elara." The petals fluttered, catching the faint breeze. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw her silhouette in the light, smiling, free of sorrow. The caretaker lifted her lantern again. "Do you see now why the garden glows?" He rose slowly, eyes never leaving the bloom. "Because even the forgotten wishes still shine." She smiled. "Because no wish is truly lost. The stars hear them all. The ones spoken in joy. The ones whispered in tears. Even the ones never said aloud." They stood in silence for a while, surrounded by the hum of the blossoms. Above them, the stars pulsed gently, as if in rhythm with the flowers below, a vast, breathing tapestry of light and longing. At last, the caretaker spoke again. "Tonight is special," she said. "Once every century, the garden releases the oldest wishes, letting them rise back into the sky. Those that have found peace become stars once more." Elian looked up. The air shimmered, and then one by one, flowers began to dissolve into faint streams of light, drifting upward like lanterns. Thousands of glowing trails rose toward the heavens, spiraling, weaving together until the entire sky seemed alive. Elian watched awestruck. "They're going home." "Yes," the caretaker whispered. "Home to the stars they once fell from." He felt something stir deep within. Not sorrow, not loss, but release. A lightness he hadn't felt in years. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the drifting light on his skin. And somewhere carried on that glow, he heard a voice again, faint but filled with peace. "Thank you for remembering." When he opened his eyes, the flower beneath the silver tree was gone. Only a faint shimmer remained on the grass, like dew kissed by dawn. Elian smiled through his tears. For the first time, the ache in his chest felt quiet. The caretaker touched his shoulder. "The night of forgotten wishes has ended. Come, the stars wait for your next step." As they walked away, the last lights of the rising wishes faded into the velvet sky. The valley dimmed to a soft glow, humming like a lullaby. And in the silence that followed, the stars themselves seemed to breathe. Countless souls, countless dreams, shining quietly, reminding the world that nothing truly lost is ever gone. The night had barely ended when the caretaker led Elian back toward the garden's heart. The air was alive again, soft murmurs drifting from the glowing petals, like sighs of gratitude after a long sleep. The stars above shimmered faintly, still remembering the wishes that had just returned to them. Elian walked in silence, feeling lighter than he had in years. It was as though every breath he took carried both the memory of sorrow and the relief of release. His steps were slower now, more reverent, as if each movement might stir the fragile beauty that surrounded him. The caretaker's lantern cast a halo of gold over the silver flowers. You've seen what becomes of old wishes, she said gently. But tonight you'll see how new ones are born. Elian turned to her. Born? She smiled. The garden never sleeps. When one wish finds peace, another takes its place. That is the rhythm of the stars, the giving and returning of dreams. She pointed ahead. Come. Tonight the heavens open. They climbed a narrow hill that curved gently upward, leading to a wide plateau at the very edge of the valley. From there, the whole star garden stretched below them, glowing like a sea of constellations. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, their light forming rivers of blue and gold that wove together like veins of living starlight. Above, the sky was vast and cloudless, dark as deep water. But Elian sensed something in it, a pressure, a presence, as though the heavens were holding their breath. The caretaker set down her lantern beside a smooth stone and gazed upward. It will begin soon. Elian followed her eyes. What will? The Starfall Festival, she whispered. It happens only once each decade. Tonight, the sky gives back what it has gathered. Fallen wishes, wandering souls, pieces of hope searching for new homes. Her words made the air itself feel sacred. They waited in silence, surrounded by the faint hum of the flowers. The night deepened further, and a strange stillness settled. Not empty but full, like the pause before a song begins. Then, without warning, the first star fell. It streaked across the heavens in a trail of silver fire, vanishing behind the horizon. Another followed. Then another. Soon the sky was alive with light. Hundreds of streaks, thousands, painting the night in ribbons of gold and blue and rose. Elian's breath caught. It's beautiful. The caretaker nodded, her eyes reflecting the falling stars. Each one carries a dream that has found a resting place. Some will sleep in the sea, some in mountains. But the ones that belong to this valley will come to us. Elian looked around. The flowers had stopped swaying. They stood perfectly still, their petals tilted upward as if listening. Then, faintly, the air began to shimmer. From the heavens, small orbs of light descended, not falling but drifting gently like glowing snow. Each one pulsed softly as it touched the earth, vanishing into the soil with a sigh. The star seeds, the caretaker said quietly. They've come. Elian knelt, reaching toward one that had landed nearby. It was no bigger than a pearl, warm against his palm. It vibrated faintly, alive with an inner hum. What happens now? He asked. They rest, she said. And when the time is right, they bloom, taking the form of the dream they carry. He turned the tiny sphere over in his hand, mesmerized. Can anyone plant one? The caretaker smiled. Only those who carry a wish strong enough to nurture it. Elian looked up at the sky. The stars still rained down, endless and silent. He thought of his journey, the long nights of wandering, the weight of his grief, the countless questions that had led him here. For the first time he didn't feel lost. He closed his hand around the seed. Then I would like to plant one, he said softly. The caretaker nodded and gestured to a small clearing near the edge of the hill. There, she said, where the wind can reach it. The new wishes need to hear the world's breath. Elian walked to the clearing, kneeling in the soft grass. The soil was warm, faintly glowing where other seeds had already settled. He pressed his fingers into the earth, feeling it pulse gently beneath his touch. He took a deep breath, holding the tiny star seed close to his heart. What do I wish for? He murmured. The caretaker's voice came like a whisper of wind. Wish not for what you want, but for what you need to release. Elian closed his eyes. The faces of those he'd lost rose behind his eyelids. His parents, his friends, Ilara. But instead of pain, he felt peace. Their voices, their laughter, their memories. They were all part of him still. I wish, he whispered, that their dreams find light again. And that mine might someday guide someone else here. Someone lost as I once was. The seed in his palm grew warmer, brighter. Then, with a trembling glow, it slipped from his fingers into the soil. The ground shimmered, absorbing it completely. For a moment nothing happened. Then a faint sprout emerged. A single stem tipped with a bud that pulsed like a heartbeat. Elian sat back, eyes wide. The caretaker smiled faintly. And so, another star joins the garden. They watched in silence as the sprout grew taller, its light deepening from silver to pale gold. Around them, more seeds began to bloom, one by one, across the valley. It was as if the earth itself had awakened, lit from within. Elian felt a tear slip down his cheek, though he wasn't sad. Every wish, every sorrow, they all return here, don't they? Yes, she said. The stars listen to all hearts, even the quietest. They sat together, surrounded by the shimmering dance of new life. The sky above was still alive with falling stars, and the valley below glowed like a second cosmos, mirroring the heavens. The wind carried faint laughter, distant but warm, the voices of dreamers old and new, all woven into the song of the night. Elian tilted his head back, watching the last few stars fall. Do the stars ever tire of giving? He asked softly. The caretaker smiled. Never. They are born from giving. Each one is a dream that once found peace. They fall so others may rise. Her words wrapped around him like a lullaby. The final star fell then, a streak of pale blue fire that split the horizon and vanished into the garden's heart. And with that, the rain of light ended. The night stilled again, softer than silence, the garden shimmering faintly like the afterglow of a dream. The caretaker rose, brushing the petals from her cloak. Come, she said. The stars have given their blessings. It's time for the wishes to rest. Elian stood, taking one last look at the valley below. His seed glowed faintly amid the countless others, a tiny light among eternity. He smiled, feeling its warmth reach him even from afar. And as they walked back down the hill, the whispers of the new blooms began, gentle, hopeful, carrying the soft sound of beginnings. The garden sang quietly under the sleeping stars, and Elian knew the cycle had begun anew. Somewhere in the dark, 1,000 wishes stirred, ready to bloom. The night after the Starfall Festival was unlike any other. The garden slept beneath a silver haze, its countless blossoms pulsing faintly like dreams still half awake. The stars above had quieted, content after their great offering, leaving behind a deep and tender stillness, the kind that feels alive with secrets. Elian sat beside the pond where he had first seen his reflection shift into memory. The air was cool, scented with dew and starlight. He could still feel the faint warmth of the star seed he had planted, as if a part of his heart now lived in the soil. The caretaker approached soundlessly, her lantern swaying in her hand. The golden light caught the edges of her robes, and for a moment she looked almost ethereal, half woman, half moonlight. She stopped beside him, gazing out over the quiet water. The garden breathes slower tonight, she said softly. It is the way of all living things after giving life. Elian smiled faintly. It feels peaceful. Like the whole valley is asleep, dreaming its own dreams. The caretaker nodded. But there was something different in her expression tonight. Something distant and heavy. The usual calm that wrapped around her seemed thinner, frayed at the edges. After a long silence, Elian asked, "You've cared for this place for so long. Do you ever rest?" Her eyes stayed on the pond. "Rest," she repeated, as though tasting the word. "Once I did." She lowered herself to the ground beside him. The lantern light softened her features, revealing the lines of years, not just of age, but of remembrance. "I have watched hundreds plant their dreams here," she said. "But once, I planted my own." Elian turned to her, surprised. "You?" She smiled faintly, a small, wistful curve. "Yes. Before I was the keeper, I was simply a woman who came here with empty hands." The night air stilled. Even the ripples on the pond seemed to hesitate, as if listening. Her voice dropped, softer than the hum of the flowers. "My name," she said, "was Elira. Many years ago, before this garden called to me, I lived in a small village by the sea. It was a place of laughter and wind, sails always full, and hearts always dreaming of horizons." Her gaze drifted far away. "I had a husband there and a son. They were my world." Elian felt the weight of her words before she even spoke the next. One stormy night, the sea took them both. The air trembled, and a distant wind stirred the petals. "I remember waiting by the shore," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Every wave that crashed sounded like their names. Every dawn I prayed they'd return. But the sea does not give back what it has claimed." Elian said nothing. There was no word that could touch that kind of loss. "I stopped speaking," Elira whispered. "I stopped dreaming. I lived only to wait. And in that waiting I began to hear things. Faint whispers in the wind. The stars calling my name. At first I thought it was grief. But one night I followed those voices inland, away from the sea." Her eyes flickered with memory. "They led me here, to this valley. Back then it wasn't like this. The flowers were few, and the air was quiet. But the ground glowed faintly as though waiting." She smiled faintly, tears glinting in her eyes. "I found a single bloom then, one lone flower glowing in the dark. When I touched it, I heard a voice." Elian leaned forward slightly. "Whose voice?" "My son's," she said, barely above a whisper. He said, "Mama, don't cry where the sea can see you. Come where the stars can hold you." The words broke something open in the air, a fragile stillness, heavy with emotion. Elian felt his chest tighten. "The flower was born from your wish." She nodded. "I didn't know then that the stars could hear sorrow. But when I wept that night, the tears that fell became seeds. And the next morning there were more flowers, small, trembling but alive." She lifted her gaze toward the glowing valley. The garden grew from grief. But it did not stay sorrowful. It became a place where pain turned to peace, where every wish, even the broken ones, could bloom again. Elian looked out across the vast sea of light and felt a deep ache stir in his heart. "So you stayed," he murmured. "I stayed," she said simply, "because the garden spoke to me. It asked me to care for the dreams that others had lost. I became its voice, its guardian. And in return, it let me see the dreams of those who found their way here." She reached out, touching the surface of the pond. Ripples spread out, shimmering with faint constellations. Every traveler who comes is searching for something. Forgiveness, meaning, love, peace. I have watched hundreds plant their wishes here. Some return years later, changed. Others never do. But their flowers bloom just the same. Elian's voice was soft. Do you ever see them again? The ones you lost. Her eyes met his, shining faintly with tears that never quite fell. In every star, she said. In every whisper of the wind through the petals. Sometimes when the night is still enough, I hear their laughter in the rustling leaves. She smiled, not sadly but gently, as if speaking of something eternal. The truth is, I am not the garden's keeper, she continued. The garden keeps me. It reminds me that nothing, no love, no dream, no wish, truly ends. It only changes form. Elian felt the weight of her story settle inside him like a stone sinking into calm water. The woman beside him was no mere guardian. She was a bridge between loss and light, between endings and beginnings. He bowed his head. You turned your pain into something that heals others. That's extraordinary. Elira shook her head slowly. It wasn't courage. It was surrender. The stars asked for my sorrow and I gave it. And in giving I became something new. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The garden breathed softly around them, each glowing bloom a heartbeat in the stillness. Finally, Elian asked, "And me? Why did the garden call to me?" She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Because it needed you," she said simply. "Every generation, the garden chooses one who carries the same burden I once did. The ache of searching. It shows them that peace isn't found by reaching, but by letting go." Her hand rested on his shoulder. "You've already begun that journey, Elian. You planted your star seed not from longing, but from love. That means the garden has accepted you." He blinked. "Accepted me? For what?" "To listen," she said softly. "To learn. To one day keep watch as I have." The realization struck him like gentle lightning. "You mean, I'm to become the next keeper?" Her eyes glimmered, reflecting 1,000 tiny stars. "Not yet," she said. "But the garden knows when a new voice is ready to sing its song." She rose then, lifting her lantern. Its light shimmered brighter than before, a golden glow that wrapped them both in warmth. "Come," she said. "The garden will dream soon, and it must not dream alone." Elian followed her through the sea of light, his thoughts swirling like the petals in the wind. The night was deep and endless, but it no longer felt empty. Behind them, the pond rippled softly, catching the stars' reflection, and for just a moment, Elian thought he saw two figures standing within the light of the water, a woman and a small boy, hand in hand, smiling beneath the stars. The whispers followed them, gentle, eternal, carrying the stories of all who had ever dreamed. And beneath those whispers, one truth glowed brighter than all others. The night after Elira's story felt different, heavier, quieter, as though the garden itself was holding its breath. The usual hum of glowing petals had dimmed into a slow, rhythmic pulse, like the heartbeat of something ancient listening from beneath the earth. Elian walked the familiar paths, his steps slow and uncertain. Elira's words still echoed in his mind. The garden knows when a new voice is ready to sing its song. He hadn't slept. The image of the woman and child in the pond had followed him into his waking thoughts, a vision so vivid, it felt less like memory and more like an invitation. The air was cool, almost electric. Above him, the stars shimmered faintly, not in still constellations, but like ripples, as though they were breathing. He stopped near his own planted star seed. It had grown now, a single silver bloom cupped like a small moon, its light soft but unwavering. He knelt beside it, brushing his fingers against its petals. And then he heard it. Faint whisper. Not from the garden this time, but from above. "Listen." Elian froze. The sound was so subtle it could have been the wind. But the voice carried a weight, gentle yet commanding, like the first note of a forgotten song. He looked up. The stars above the pond had begun to move, slowly aligning into a spiral pattern, faint threads of light weaving between them. He whispered, "What are you showing me?" The spiral grew brighter, and one single star at its center flickered, sending a thin beam of silver light down to the earth, landing somewhere beyond the farthest edge of the garden. A place he'd never walked before. Elian turned. The light pulsed, steady as a heartbeat. The pull was irresistible, not of curiosity, but of recognition. He walked past the willow arches and the whispering flowers, where the familiar path ended in a curtain of ivy. The air here felt older, untouched by breath or memory. He hesitated. The ivy shimmered faintly, drops of dew catching the moonlight like tiny stars. Then he remembered what Elira had said the night before. "The garden chooses who listens." So he listened. He closed his eyes. At first, there was nothing but silence, deep and endless. Then, faintly, a sound began to emerge. It wasn't words this time, but music. A soft, trembling hum like wind through crystal glass. It rose and fell with the rhythm of his heartbeat, weaving into a melody that seemed to call his name. When he opened his eyes, the ivy was gone. In its place stood a narrow path of light. Elian stepped forward. The air changed immediately. The deeper he walked, the brighter everything became. Not harsh or blinding, but soft and fluid, like moonlight seen through water. The path wound through tall, pale trees whose leaves glowed faintly blue, shimmering like scales of light. Every step he took seemed to echo with the whisper of distant stars. He realized, this was the part of the garden no one spoke of, the one hidden between the folds of the world. He whispered to himself, "The hidden garden." The name felt right, as though he had always known it. He came to a clearing where the ground was covered in silver moss. At its center grew a massive flower, far larger than any he'd seen before. Its petals were translucent, each vein filled with starlight that pulsed slowly like breath. The flower's stem was rooted in a pool of still, mirror-like water, and within that reflection, the stars above spun endlessly, forming constellations that shifted with every heartbeat. Elian approached slowly. The moment he stepped into the clearing, the air vibrated with a low, resonant tone. The petals of the great flower trembled and unfurled wider. And then it spoke. Not with words, but through feeling. A rush of warmth, sorrow, and infinite calm washing through him all at once. His thoughts weren't his own anymore. They merged with something vast and timeless. A voice filled his mind. "You have come as she once did." Elian's breath caught. Who are you? We are what remains of every dream ever planted. We are the heart of this garden. The petals glowed brighter, illuminating his face. When sorrow becomes too heavy for a soul to carry, it falls to us. We take it, nurture it, and return it as light. Elian felt tears in his eyes. You mean, the flowers? They're not just dreams. They're pieces of people. Yes, fragments of what once hurt, turned into beauty. And every generation, one must tend the cycle, one who listens, one who remembers. The realization hit him like the toll of a great bell. The keeper. The voice softened. The keeper's burden is not to protect us, but to remember us. To remind the world that pain, when shared, becomes light. Elira heard us when no one else could. Now we call to you. He stepped closer, the silver water rippling beneath his feet. Why me? The voice seemed to sigh, like the breeze through distant stars. Because your heart has cracks wide enough for light to enter. For a long moment, Elian stood in silence, surrounded by the slow pulse of celestial breath. Every star reflected in the water seemed to look back at him, not as a stranger, but as a mirror. He thought of his life before this, the restless wandering, the dreams he'd tried to forget, the ache that had driven him toward this valley. All of it, he realized now, had been guiding him here. He whispered, "What do you want me to do?" The flower's center began to glow with fierce light. There is a seed beneath this pool, a star that has never fallen. It belongs to the next dawn. Take it, and when the time comes, plant it where sorrow sleeps deepest. Only then will the garden awaken fully. Elian looked down. Beneath the water, deep in the reflection of stars, he saw it, a single small orb of light, pulsing like a heart. He hesitated only a moment before kneeling. The water was warm as his fingers slipped beneath its surface, and the light seemed to rise to meet him. When he lifted it, the pool stilled completely, the entire clearing falling silent. The voice whispered one last time, "Guard it well, dream listener, for within it lies the memory of every lost wish, and the hope of those yet to dream." The light in his hands dimmed to a soft glow, small enough to fit in his palm. Then everything faded. The trees dissolved into mist, the silver moss into starlight, until Elian found himself once again standing before the ivy curtain. Only now, it hung open behind him, glowing faintly as if watching him leave. He turned to look back, but the path was gone. The hidden garden had vanished, like a dream swallowed by dawn. Only the starseed remained, warm and pulsing in his hand. As he stepped back into the main garden, he saw Elira waiting by the pond, her lantern flickering softly. Her eyes widened when she saw what he carried. She smiled, not surprised but deeply moved. "So," she said quietly, "the garden has spoken." Elian nodded. "It showed me where its heart lies." Her gaze softened. "Then you've truly been chosen." He looked at the glowing seed in his palm, a fragment of starlight, a promise waiting to bloom, and whispered, "Then I'll keep its memory alive." The stars above pulsed in quiet agreement. And somewhere, deep beneath the roots of the valley, the hidden garden stirred, awake once more. The night was still, almost reverent. The air of the star garden shimmered faintly, carrying the hush of countless whispered dreams. Elian stood where the hidden garden's entrance had been. His hand curled protectively around the small glowing seed he had brought back. Elira stood beside him in silence. The soft glow from her lantern painted her face in amber warmth, but her eyes lingered on the light in his palm. "It remembers you," she said quietly. "The seed only glows that way when it knows its keeper." Elian looked down at it, feeling the gentle pulse of warmth against his skin. Steady, alive. "It feels familiar," he murmured. "Like something I've lost and somehow found again." Elira smiled faintly. "Perhaps it has found you. The garden has strange ways of showing us who we are." He turned toward the garden paths, where the night stretched wide and endless. I want to understand what it's trying to tell me. Then listen, she said softly. The answers always bloom where the heart remembers. The moon hung low, swollen with silver light, and the stars above scattered like drops of fire across the dark. The garden had changed since the night before, not in form but in feeling. The air was warmer, gentler, as though it knew he carried a piece of its heart. Elian walked slowly, the path glowing faintly under his feet. The flowers turned toward him as he passed, petals fluttering in recognition. They didn't whisper tonight. They sang, though the song was wordless. A low, humming lullaby that trembled through the ground and into his bones. He found himself drawn back toward the pond, the mirror pond that had once reflected his forgotten memories. The water was perfectly still, as if waiting. He knelt beside it, his reflection pale in the moonlight. Slowly he opened his hand. The starseed shimmered softly, and its light rippled across the surface of the pond like a breath. And then he saw it. At the far edge of the water, something had begun to bloom. A flower, small, fragile and golden white, rising from the soil like a flicker of starlight. It wasn't there before. Elian stood, heart pounding softly in his chest. He stepped closer. The petals trembled with light, and faint tendrils of silver mist curled around its stem. But there was something different about it. Its glow was familiar, like a melody he once knew but couldn't name. He reached out a hand, hovering just above the bloom. The air around it was warm, scented with something faintly sweet, the smell of apples and rain. And then the whisper came. "Do you remember me?" He froze. The voice was soft, tender, the voice of a child. Elian's breath caught. His heart seemed to stop, then stutter into a rhythm that matched the glow of the petals. He whispered, Who are you?" The flower shimmered brighter. "You wished for me." A flicker of memory flashed through his mind. A boy standing beneath a falling star, hands clasped tight, whispering a wish into the night. He was no older than 10. He remembered the ache in his small chest, the loneliness he couldn't name, and the hope that something out there might hear him. The memory grew sharper. The whisper of wind through tall grass, the faint scent of spring after rain. And then, clear as glass, he remembered the wish itself. "Please, let me never be alone." Elian staggered back, breath trembling. "That was me." The petals of the flower fluttered as if in laughter. "I was your first dream," it said, its voice now bright with warmth. "You planted me when you were still small enough to believe that stars listened." He sank to his knees before it, tears stinging his eyes. "All this time, you were here." "I was waiting," the voice answered. "Every dream you had after that, every wish, every sorrow became light around me. You forgot, but I remembered. I kept growing." Elian reached out and touched the flower gently. It was warm, impossibly warm, like sunlight trapped in silk. The moment his fingers brushed its petals, the world around him shifted. The pond rippled, and suddenly he was standing not in the star garden, but in a field of golden grass beneath a twilight sky. Fireflies danced in the air, and somewhere in the distance, a boy laughed, a sound bright with innocence. He saw himself, small, barefoot, running through the field with his arms outstretched toward the stars. The child stopped, looked up, and whispered that same wish again into the night. "Please, let me never be alone." The grown Elian watched, his chest tightening with emotion. He wanted to reach out, to tell the boy that the wish had come true in ways he could never have imagined, that he had found the stars again, and they had whispered back. But before he could move, the child looked toward him, directly at him, and smiled. The scene dissolved into starlight, folding back into the quiet of the garden. Elian was kneeling once more beside the flower, its glow now softer, steadier. He whispered, "You were my first dream, and I forgot you." "You had to," the flower murmured, "to find me again. Dreams don't vanish. They just sleep until we're ready to remember." He felt the truth of it deep in his chest, in the hollow spaces where longing once lived. He asked, "Why show me this now?" The petals trembled, scattering faint particles of light into the air. "Because you've learned to listen," it said. "And because the garden remembers every wish that ever touched the sky. Yours was the first one to be heard." Elian bowed his head, tears falling silently. The petals shimmered brighter, and for a moment, the light wrapped around him like an embrace, not from the flower, but from the child he once was. "You were never alone," the voice whispered. "You just needed to look up." When the glow faded, Elian found a single petal resting in his palm, soft as silk, glowing faintly with golden light. He held it close to his heart. The warmth it carried was not sorrow but peace, a calm, tender reminder that some wishes don't need to be fulfilled to be true, they only need to be remembered. Behind him, Elira's voice broke the silence. "You found it," she said softly. "Your own dream." Elian nodded, rising slowly. "Yes," he said, his voice trembling. "And I think it found me too." She smiled, eyes glimmering with quiet knowing. "That's what the petal of memory does. It returns what we lose, not to keep, but to understand." He looked once more at the glowing bloom, its petals folding gently as though going to sleep. The garden seemed to hum in response, a soft, contented sigh. Elian turned toward the stars, the petals still glowing in his hand. For the first time in years he felt whole, not because he had found something new, but because he had finally remembered who he had always been. The night arrived quietly. Too quietly. Elian stood at the edge of the star garden, the soft petal of memory still glowing faintly in his palm. The air felt heavier than usual, thick with stillness. Above him, the heavens, normally a vast tapestry of glimmering light, were utterly dark. No stars, no shimmer, not even the thin silver thread of the moon. Just silence. The absence pressed against his chest like a slow tide, deep and unfamiliar. For the first time since coming to the valley, the garden wasn't whispering. The glowing flowers had dimmed, their colors muted into shades of pearl and ash. Even the pond lay black and unreflective, a perfect mirror of nothingness. "The sky has fallen asleep," Elira whispered behind him, her voice trembling with awe. Elian turned. She was standing barefoot in the dew, her lantern unlit, her expression solemn. The faint glow from the petals of nearby blooms barely touched her face. "What does it mean?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "I have only seen it once before. The night the stars slept. It is said to come when the heavens have listened to too many dreams. They rest, to remember what they've heard." Her words settled in his heart like dust. He looked back at the blank sky, feeling the enormity of it. A world without stars felt like a world without heartbeat. They walked together through the dim paths of the garden. Each step made the earth sigh faintly, as if reluctant to wake the silence. Elian noticed that even the flowers seemed to bow, their petals curled inward like sleeping hands. The soft silver veins that usually glowed with celestial energy were now dull, pulsing faintly once every few breaths, like the slow rhythm of something dreaming. The quiet wasn't empty. It was alive. Every so often, Elian thought he heard something faint, a deep hum far below the surface, like the breathing of a sleeping giant beneath the roots. "Do you feel that?" he whispered. Elira nodded. "Yes, the garden sleeps when the stars do. Shares their rhythm. The silence isn't a loss, it's a promise." They reached the mirror pond. Usually it shimmered with reflections of the heavens. Now it was dark as ink, swallowing all light. Elian knelt beside it, setting the petal of memory on the surface. The tiny petal floated, glowing softly, the only point of light in the vast darkness. As it drifted, ripples spread outward in perfect circles, and faint patterns began to appear. Constellations, faint and flickering, drawn from memory rather than the sky. Elira gasped quietly. The pond remembers even when the stars forget. Elian watched as one by one, images rose from the black water, ghostly reflections of past nights. He saw the falling stars of the festival, the hidden garden blooming in silver light, the first lantern he had ever seen drifting across the surface. But as the images shimmered, they began to fade. The darkness deepened again, swallowing even the reflection of his face. "They're going away," he whispered. Elira closed her eyes. "They're only resting, Elian. Like the stars." A faint wind moved through the garden, stirring the petals of the sleeping flowers. It carried with it a soft, rhythmic sound, almost like a lullaby hummed by the earth itself. Elian felt it vibrate through his bones, slow and steady, and an inexplicable calm settled over him. He sat down beside the pond. Elira joined him, setting her unlit lantern on the ground. For a long while, neither of them spoke. It was a night for listening to nothing, and finding everything inside that nothing. Elian thought of the small boy he had seen in the petal of memory, his younger self making that first wish. He realized that the boy had lived in this silence once too, before the stars ever answered him. He whispered into the still air, "Maybe they need rest from us, from all our wishes." Elira smiled faintly, eyes half closed. Maybe they simply dream their own dreams. That thought touched him deeply. He had always imagined the stars as watchers, listeners. He had never imagined that they might have their own hearts, their own quiet longings. "What do you think they dream about?" he asked. She didn't open her eyes. "About the things they've seen. About us." Hours passed. The darkness held steady, but its texture changed. Softer now, like velvet rather than stone. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt full, filled with unseen movement, quiet breathing, the heartbeat of something enormous and kind. The flowers began to pulse faintly in rhythm with it, as though the garden and the heavens shared a single dream. Then, without warning, the star seed in Elian's pocket began to glow. He drew it out. Its light was stronger than before, gentle but sure, as if it had woken while everything else slept. The petal of memory shimmered in response, glowing the same golden hue. Elira opened her eyes, startled. "It's awake." Elian nodded. "Maybe it's meant to keep watch while they rest." He held both lights together in his palms, and the garden around them seemed to lean closer, listening. "Then let's give them something to dream about," he said quietly. They stood together at the edge of the pond. Elian placed the glowing seed at the water's surface beside the petal. The two lights touched and merged, spreading a soft radiance that rippled outward in waves. The dark pond began to shimmer once more, not reflecting stars this time, but the dreams of the earth itself. The slow turning of roots, the sigh of trees, the gentle drift of pollen in unseen air. Above them, the black sky shifted slightly, like a great creature stirring in its sleep. A single beam of pale light broke through the darkness, faint as breath, and touched the pond. Then another, and another. Not stars yet, but hints, promises. Elian smiled softly. They're dreaming of light again. Elira looked up, her eyes glistening. When dawn comes, they'll wake renewed. The air warmed. The glow from the pond grew stronger, spreading through the paths, through every flower and branch. The garden began to hum again, low and content, like a song being remembered after a long silence. Elian felt his heartbeat slow to match its rhythm. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to speak or question. He simply was. Part of the quiet, part of the dreaming. The petal of memory drifted across the water, its glow merging with the reflections until it vanished completely, leaving only a faint circle of light behind. By the time the first blush of dawn touched the horizon, the stars had begun to stir. One by one, faint points of silver returning to the sky. Elian looked up. They're waking. Lyra smiled. And they'll remember who watched over them while they slept. He turned to her, the faint morning wind brushing through his hair. Do you think they'll hear us again? Her voice was a whisper. Always. But even the heavens need silence between songs. Elian nodded, understanding now. The silence hadn't been an ending. It had been a breath, a pause between heartbeats. He watched as the last traces of darkness faded, replaced by the soft blush of morning. The garden shimmered once more, every flower reawakening, every petal alive with color. The stars were gone now, hidden by sunlight, but he knew they were there, resting, listening. He closed his eyes and whispered a final thank you to the sky. Sleep well, my old friends. Dream kindly. The first light of dawn trembled at the edge of the horizon, pale and uncertain, like a child waking from a long dream. The star garden lay silent, wrapped in the hush that follows a great secret. Elian and Elira still sat beside the mirror pond, the faintest glow touching their faces. The stars above, who had slept through the long night, now blinked open one by one, shyly at first. Their reflections shimmered across the pond's surface until water and sky seemed to trade places, each mirroring the other's awakening. A thin beam of sunlight slipped through the silver vines and kissed the surface of the nearest blossom. The flower responded. Its petals quivered and then burst into brilliance. A ripple of light swept outward like a tide of dawn. One by one, the other flowers stirred, unfurling as though inhaling sunlight for the first time. Their colors deepened, rose, gold, and sapphire, and their glow returned not as before, but stronger, purer, alive. They're waking, Elian whispered. Elira smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. No, Elian, they're becoming. The whole valley shimmered now. The vines along the gate shone like molten silver. The air shimmered with warmth and scent, the perfume of starlight and blooming dreams. Each petal held a pulse of memory. The whispers returned, but softer this time, like laughter carried from far away. The garden hummed with the harmony of renewed life. Elian rose slowly, his boots sinking into the moss, which now glowed faintly beneath him. He felt something shift inside, a quiet joy, deep and steady, like a lantern being lit within his chest. All around him, the flowers bowed toward the sun, their light blending with its rays. For the first time, the star garden gleamed not only under the night sky but in daylight, a secret revealed. As they walked through the paths, Elira brushed her fingertips against a vine, and it bloomed instantly, releasing a fine mist of gold. "The stars have shared their dreams with the sun," she murmured. "It has never happened before." Elian looked around in wonder. The garden he had come to know, the quiet, moonlit refuge of whispers, had become something new. No longer a sanctuary of silence, but a celebration of life. The flowers swayed as though greeting them. The air vibrated with the music of unseen bells. Every breeze carried fragments of voices, dreamers who had once left their wishes here, now rejoicing that their dreams had found light again. He heard them, faint echoes of laughter, words of gratitude, songs without lyrics. And in those murmurs, he thought he heard his own voice. His younger self, whispering that long-forgotten wish from childhood. "Please, let me find where the light goes when it sleeps." A smile touched his lips. "I think I finally know," he whispered. They reached the heart of the garden, the clearing where the eternal tree stood, its bark patterned with star-like veins. Sunlight poured through the canopy, and for the first time, the tree shimmered with both moonlight and dawn. At its base something stirred. A cocoon of silver threads that neither of them had noticed before began to glow, unraveling slowly. From within, a tiny sphere of light floated upward, wobbling like a newborn flame. It rose until it hovered at Elian's eye level. Elira gasped. A new star. The sphere drifted closer to Elian and pulsed once, twice, then merged into his chest with a sound like a soft sigh. Warmth flooded him. His mind filled with images, memories of every step he had taken in this valley. The gate of silver vines, the whispering blooms, the silent night of rest. And beneath it all, a voice, gentle and familiar. "You watched over us while we slept. Now we light the path for you." Elian fell to his knees, overcome by the sheer tenderness of it. The light from within him spilled outward, tracing patterns in the soil. Wherever it touched, new buds rose, small, delicate, glowing with gold rather than silver. Elira knelt beside him, her hands trembling. "Elian, you've become part of it. The garden remembers you now." He looked up, eyes shining. "Then I'll never really leave." She smiled through her tears. "No one ever truly does." The warmth spread across the valley. From every flower, filaments of light lifted into the air like drifting fireflies. They twirled together, forming streams of gold that wound around the trees, the stones, the water. The mirror pond reflected not just the sky now, but the earth itself, each glowing petal mirrored by a spark above. For one perfect moment, day and night existed together. The sun hung in the east, radiant and alive. The stars lingered in the west, fading but smiling. Between them, the garden thrummed, a bridge between worlds. Elian stood again, the last of the golden filaments wrapping around his wrists before dissolving into light. "Do you feel it?" he asked. Elira nodded, closing her eyes. The world breathing again. Every flower is singing. Indeed, there was music in the air now, not of instruments but of harmony itself. The sound of sunlight on petals, of wind through dreams. It grew until it filled everything, vibrating in the bones of the valley. The eternal tree pulsed once more, releasing a soft bell-like tone that echoed across the hills. The caretaker bowed her head. "The return of the light," she whispered reverently. Elian took a deep breath. "What happens now?" She looked toward the horizon. "Now the garden will share its light with the world. When travelers sleep beneath open skies, they'll dream brighter. When someone plants a seed of hope, it will glow faintly like these blossoms. He smiled. Then every garden could become a star. Alira's laughter chimed like wind through crystal. Yes, that was always the dream. As the morning advanced, the glow softened but did not fade. The flowers found balance, half bathed in sunlight, half shimmering with starlight trapped within. Elian turned once more to the pond. His reflection returned at last. Not a memory this time, but himself alive at peace. Behind him, the garden stretched infinitely, each petal a small universe. "I think I understand now," he said quietly. "The stars never left us. We just had to learn how to see them in the daylight." Alira rested a hand on his shoulder. "And now you carry their light wherever you go." He looked up. The morning sky gleamed with faint traces of silver fading into blue. Somewhere high above, the stars watched silently, their rest complete. He felt their warmth in his heartbeat, their whispers in the breeze. The petal of memory drifted past him, carried by the wind, glowing softly before vanishing into the air. Elian smiled. "Thank you," he whispered, unsure whether he spoke to the garden, the caretaker, or the heavens themselves. Perhaps to all three. The garden pulsed one final time, a deep, radiant breath, and then settled into tranquil beauty. The return of the light was complete. Birdsong joined the morning wind. The world reborn exhaled. Elian closed his eyes and listened. Every sound, every shimmer, every heartbeat of the valley carried one message. The light never truly leaves. It only changes its home. The morning after the return of the light dawned soft and golden, as though the sky itself had been brushed with the dust of dreams. The star garden shimmered gently, its flowers bowing to the breeze that carried the faint perfume of night's memory. Elian stood by the mirror pond, watching the ripples glisten like silver threads woven by invisible hands. The reflection of the eternal tree danced across the surface, its branches heavy with new blossoms that pulsed like quiet heartbeats. Behind him, the caretaker, Alira, approached slowly. Her footsteps made no sound against the moss. She carried a small wooden box cradled in her hands, its surface carved with swirling constellations. Elian turned to her and smiled softly. "The garden feels different today." Alira nodded, her expression tender but solemn. "It's because your dream has awakened." He blinked. "My dream?" "Yes," she said, setting the box upon a flat stone beside the pond. "The seed you planted that first night. It has grown, Elian. And now, the garden is ready to give its gift back to you." A hush fell over the garden. Even the flowers seemed to listen. Alira knelt and opened the wooden box. Inside lay a single bloom, unlike any Elian had seen before. Its petals shimmered with shifting colors, gold, azure, silver, and rose, blending in endless motion like the surface of the sky reflected in a tear. Pulsed gently alive. Elian knelt beside it, his breath catching. "It's beautiful. But what does it mean?" Alira smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "This flower was born from the wish you buried beneath the stars. The garden has nurtured it with light and memory. It carries your dream, shaped, healed, and ready to be set free." Elian reached out, hesitating. "I don't even remember what I wished for." "You don't need to," Alira said gently. "Dreams have their own way of remembering what we forget." He touched the edge of the petal. A warmth spread through his fingertips, flowing up his arm, wrapping around his heart. In an instant, the world around him dissolved. He stood again in the vision of his past, himself as a child, sitting on a grassy hill beneath a blanket of stars. His younger self was crying softly, clutching a broken toy, watching the lights in the sky with longing. "I wish I could keep the light forever," the boy whispered, "so no one ever feels lost again." The memory faded. Elian gasped softly as the garden returned around him, his hand still resting on the glowing bloom. Elira watched him with knowing eyes. "That was your wish." He nodded slowly. "To keep the light for everyone. And now," she said, "you will return it." Elian frowned slightly. "Return it?" She gestured to the pond. "The gift of the garden is not meant to be kept. Must be shared. Every traveler who plants a seed here gives a piece of themselves to the world, and takes with them the strength to shine again." He looked down at the flower. The colors shifted like the aurora, seemed to breathe, waiting. Elira stepped back, giving him space. "The garden chose you for this, Elian. You've walked among its whispers, heard its silence, and carried its hope. Now it asks you to carry its light beyond these walls." He stood, the weight of her words pressing softly on his chest. Around him the garden rustled, a sound not of wind, but of quiet encouragement. He took the flower gently in both hands. The petals were warm against his palms, their glow reflecting in his eyes. "What if I fail?" he asked softly. "What if the world doesn't understand this light?" Elira's smile was serene. "Light does not ask to be understood. It only asks to be seen." A single ray of sunlight fell through the trees, striking the flower. It flared, gold and white, pure and blinding. The garden responded in kind. Every blossom brightened, sending ribbons of light toward the pond, where they merged into a single stream of luminescence winding around Elian like a living veil. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he could feel the dreams of others, the laughter of a child, the tearful hope of a mother, the quiet wish of a lonely soul staring at the night sky. All of them flowed into him, not as weight, but as warmth. He felt complete. When he opened his eyes, the flower in his hands had changed. Its petals were now translucent, filled with moving constellations. Within its center flickered a tiny flame, soft, steady, eternal. Elira spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "The light of your dream has become the light of many. Carry it with you, and wherever it shines, peace will follow." Elian nodded, his throat tight. "How will I know where to take it?" "The world will call," she said. "It always does. You'll feel it in the wind, in the hush before sleep, in the hearts of those who have forgotten how to dream." She reached forward and closed his hands around the flower. "This is your gift of the garden, Elian. Share it, and it will never fade." For a while they stood in silence. The light around them began to settle, the radiance fading into the calm golden hue of dawn. Birds began to sing again from the treetops. Elian exhaled slowly, feeling both weightless and grounded. The flower's glow now pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. He turned toward the distant path that led beyond the silver gate, the same one he had walked through on that first night when the stars whispered his name. Elira watched him go, her eyes warm but glistening. "When you leave this garden," she said, "remember that it doesn't end here. The light within you will plant new gardens wherever your kindness touches." He smiled, his voice quiet but certain. "Then I'll keep walking." As he approached the gate, The vines parted without a sound. The air beyond shimmered, filled with dust-like motes of light, petals carried by unseen winds. He stepped through. The light followed him, weaving around his form like gentle wings. The last sound he heard was Elira's voice carried on the breeze. When your heart glows, the stars will listen. Elian walked down the hill beyond the garden, the valley behind him gleaming faintly like a dream half remembered. The world before him stretched endless and bright. For a moment he paused, holding up the glowing flower. Its light spread across the landscape, touching the grass, the trees, the clouds. Wherever it touched, color deepened, life stirred. The petals shimmered once more, and then, as if by their own will, drifted free, dissolving into the morning air. 1,000 specks of gold spiraled upward, joining the sunlight. Elian smiled. The dream had been released. And though the flower was gone, its warmth remained within him, a quiet, steady pulse that would never fade. He whispered softly to the wind, "Thank you for the light." The sun had long set, but the star garden shimmered as though it carried a sunrise within its heart. The air glowed with soft golds and silvers, the flowers pulsing like breathing constellations. The world beyond was asleep, yet the garden stirred with quiet purpose. Tonight was not an ordinary night. It was the night of farewell. Elian stood once again by the mirror pond, now calm and luminous under a deep sapphire sky. He held the gift of the garden close to his chest, feeling its faint pulse, the rhythm of dreams not his own. The petals he had released that morning had dissolved into light, but their warmth still lingered within him. Behind him, footsteps approached, gentle, steady. Elira, the caretaker of dreams, appeared with a lantern in her hands. Its frame was delicate silver, and inside it flickered a flame the color of moonlight. She smiled softly, her eyes filled with both peace and sorrow. "It's time," she said simply. Elian turned toward her. "Time to leave." Elira nodded. "Yes, but not before the farewell. The garden never lets a dream go without a blessing." The pond reflected the starlight above, though the stars themselves seemed dimmer, as if bowing in respect. Around them, the flowers swayed, whispering faint melodies that rose and fell like the breath of the earth itself. Elira handed Elian the lantern. "Every traveler who departs takes part in the ritual of release. Tonight, the garden will remember you as you have remembered it." He studied the lantern's flame. It didn't flicker like ordinary fire. It pulsed gently, steady and calm, as though it was alive. "What do I do?" he asked. Elira gestured to the pond. "You give it a piece of your heart, a memory, a feeling, something precious you wish to share with the stars. Then you let it rise." Elian looked down at the pond again. His reflection stared back. Older now, quieter but lighter somehow. He closed his eyes. The moments came to him like drifting leaves on a slow current. The first time he had seen the glowing flowers, the whispers among the willows, the mirror of memories, the voice of his childhood wish. He thought of the night when the stars went dark and then burned brighter than ever. He thought of Elira, the patient wisdom in her eyes, the gentleness of her voice that seemed to come from the earth itself. And above all, he thought of peace. The kind of peace that didn't erase pain but softened it. The peace that came from remembering. When he opened his eyes, he whispered softly, "For every lost dream may there be light." The flame within the lantern flared softly, its glow deepening to a radiant gold. Elira smiled and nodded approvingly. "It has accepted your wish." She then lifted her hand, and as she did, dozens of flowers around them began to rise, petals detaching from their stems, swirling upward in graceful spirals of light. They hovered in the air like tiny stars waiting to be reborn. Elian watched in awe. "They're alive." Alira's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Each petal carries a dream that once rested in the soil of this garden. Tonight they will return to the sky." She raised her lantern high. "Will you help me send them?" Elian nodded, feeling the lump in his throat. Together they stepped closer to the pond. The petals floated gently toward them, surrounding them like a slow-moving constellation. Alira began to chant, a low, melodic hum that seemed older than the stars themselves. Her voice carried through the still air, harmonizing with the whisper of the flowers. Elian followed her lead, holding his lantern to the sky. The petals drew toward its light, gathering above the flame like moths to warmth. For a moment, the world fell completely silent. No wind, no sound, only light. Then, as if on cue, Alira whispered the final word of her chant. "Rise!" The petals responded. One by one, they began to lift into the sky, glowing softly as they rose higher and higher. Each carried a faint shimmer of gold, trailing behind it like the tail of a comet. The night above them blossomed. Thousands of petals filled the heavens, turning the darkness into a vast ocean of moving light. The stars themselves seemed to flicker in response, welcoming their return. Elian watched, tears glimmering in his eyes. The sight was too beautiful for words. It was as if the universe had awakened just to say goodbye. Alira's voice broke the silence. "Every dream finds its home, Elian. Some in hearts, some in stars." He turned to her. "And what about you? Will you stay here forever?" She smiled softly, the glow of the lantern reflected in her eyes. "I am part of the garden. As long as there are dreams to tend, I will remain." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll carry its light where you cannot go." Her expression softened, pride and affection mingling in her gaze. "That is the way of all dreamers." The last of the petals vanished into the night, leaving behind a soft luminescence that drifted gently down upon the garden. The flowers below shone brighter, their colors deepening, as though they had been blessed by their departed kin. Alira lowered her lantern and turned to Elian. "It's done." He exhaled, feeling an ache of quiet finality settle in his chest. "It feels like saying goodbye to something I'll never see again." She shook her head gently. "No, Elian. You will see it again. Every time someone closes their eyes and dares to dream, the light you carry will awaken theirs." He looked down at the lantern in his hands. Its flame had dimmed to a faint glow, but it still burned, soft, patient, eternal. He whispered, "Thank you." Alira inclined her head. "Thank the garden. It saw you before you ever saw it." Elian smiled faintly, his voice trembling. "Then I'll never forget." He turned toward the silver gate once more. The vines parted just as they had before, revealing a horizon washed in starlight. As he stepped forward, Alira's voice called softly behind him. "When you light a lantern, remember tonight. Remember that even farewells can shine." He stopped, looked back, and for a moment their eyes met. Two souls bound by a shared dream beneath a sky of falling petals. Then he lifted his lantern high, letting it go. It drifted upward slowly, the flame inside flickering brighter as it rose. Higher, higher, until it joined the other glowing petals and vanished among the stars. The night grew still again. The air smelled of jasmine and memory. Elian stood alone at the threshold, watching until the last light faded from view. A single tear traced down his cheek, not of sadness, but of something deeper, quieter. He turned his gaze toward the path ahead, lit faintly by the lingering glow of the lanterns. The world awaited. He took a breath, smiled softly to himself, and began to walk, his heart carrying the light of 1,000 dreams. The world was still. A faint mist hung over the valley, tinted by the fading glow of the stars that had drifted into morning. The silver vines of the gate shimmered one last time, then melted back into the earth, as if the star garden itself had exhaled and gone back to sleep. Elian stood quietly where the path began, the same path that had once led him into the mystery. Now it led him away. The lantern he had released was gone, but its light still lingered in his chest, pulsing softly with every heartbeat. He looked over his shoulder one last time. The valley behind him was wrapped in silver fog, but he didn't feel loss anymore, only warmth. He whispered, barely audible, "Goodbye, Elira." And with that he began to walk. The road was silent except for the crunch of his boots on soft soil. The air had changed, cleaner, lighter, carrying a quiet peace that seemed to follow him like an unseen companion. Birds were beginning to stir in the distance. The sky blushed pink along the horizon, and dew sparkled on every blade of grass like scattered starlight. For a long time, Elian simply walked without destination. The garden's magic had faded from the world around him, but he realized that it had not left him. Every step he took carried a faint echo of the whispers, the hum of dreams, the rhythm of the earth breathing. He smiled softly to himself. Maybe, he murmured, the garden was never a place at all. Hours passed. The path wound through meadows, forests, and streams that mirrored the pale dawn sky. Elian stopped by one of them, kneeling to cup his hands in the water. It was cold and alive, shimmering like the pond from which he'd watched the lanterns rise. When he looked into the stream, he saw not just his reflection, but something deeper. Flashes of light, petals floating by beneath the surface. They dissolved when he blinked, but the feeling remained. "You're still with me," he said softly. The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of star lilies, the flowers of the garden. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he was there again, standing among glowing petals, Elira smiling faintly, stars falling like rain. When he opened his eyes, he was surrounded by the living world again. Trees, grass, sky, but everything looked different, brighter, more alive. It was as though the boundary between the garden and the world had disappeared, leaving only wonder. As he continued on, Elian began to meet people along the road. Travelers, shepherds, wanderers like himself. They would pause, look into his eyes, and somehow feel calmer, lighter. He never told them about the garden, never spoke of stars or petals. But when he smiled, they felt as if they had glimpsed something eternal, a quiet peace that needed no words. One evening, he met a young girl sitting by a withered tree, clutching a wilted flower. She looked up at him, eyes full of tears. "My wish never came true," she said. "I planted this flower for my brother, but he never came back." Elian knelt beside her, his voice gentle as a lullaby. "Then maybe," he said softly, "the flower isn't for what you lost, but for what you remember." He placed his hand over hers, and to her surprise, the wilted petals began to glow faintly. Not bright, just enough to shimmer. Her eyes widened. How? Elian only smiled. Dreams never die, little one. They just change shape. When he stood and continued down the road, she watched him go, holding her flower close. Behind her, the wind carried a faint whisper, soft like the rustle of petals. Days turned to weeks. Elian wandered through valleys and towns, across bridges and hills. Wherever he went, people spoke of a man who brought calm to the restless, who listened without judgment, whose eyes seemed to hold stars. He didn't seek recognition. He didn't even realize he had become a legend. He was simply walking, listening to the world, to the quiet within it, to the soft hum that never left his heart. Sometimes, when he lay beneath the open sky at night, he would see petals of light drift across the heavens. Perhaps they were stars. Perhaps they were memories. He would close his eyes and whisper, "Thank you, Elira, for showing me where peace begins." And sleep would take him gently, as if the garden itself cradled his dreams. One night, in a small mountain village, Elian found himself sitting beside a fire outside a quiet inn. The stars above were clear and bright, countless, endless. A traveler sat beside him, weary and lost. "I've been searching," the traveler confessed, "for something I can't name. A place I can rest." Elian smiled, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Rest isn't a place," he said softly. "It's a remembering." The man frowned. "Of what?" Elian looked to the stars, his voice a whisper. "Of who you are when you stop searching." The fire crackled. The wind sighed through the trees. The traveler stared into the flames for a long time, and when he finally looked up, Elian was gone. But the air around him felt lighter, as if someone had taken away a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying. Far away, Elian stood on a hill overlooking the valley below. The moon hung low, bathing everything in silver. He breathed deeply, the cool air filling his lungs, his heart calm and still. He realized then, the journey had never been about finding the garden. It had always been about what the garden had awakened within him. The peace he had sought in places, in answers, in dreams. It had been waiting quietly in his own soul, like a seed of starlight. He smiled, feeling tears prick at the corners of his eyes. "So this is what it means to rest," he whispered. Above him, the sky shimmered faintly, the same glow as the night of the farewell lanterns. He felt it then, the garden watching, listening, proud. The stars seemed to hum softly, not words, not melody, but something deeper. It was home. Elian lay down on the grass, hands folded over his chest, eyes half closed. The world was vast, the night endless, but within him everything was still. The whispers faded, the light dimmed. Only the soft rhythm of breath remained, slow, calm, eternal. The first breath of dawn drifted through the valley. Soft gold brushed across the hills, turning mist into ribbons of light. Dewdrops clung to each blade of grass, glimmering like fragments of the night sky that had fallen to earth. Elian stood upon the hill where he had rested. His cloak rippled in the morning wind, edges glowing faintly with starlight, a quiet reminder of where he had been. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, the air fresh and alive. For the first time he felt no weight in his chest, no ache of longing. Only peace, vast and complete. The world around him felt new. The scent of flowers carried promise. The rustle of trees felt like a gentle farewell. And somewhere beneath it all, he could hear the faint hum of the star garden, not as a place far away, but as a rhythm echoing within him. He smiled. It's time. The sun rose slowly behind him, and as its first light touched the valley, something stirred beneath his feet. Where the grass had bent under his rest, the soil began to shimmer. First just a flicker, then a pulse. A single beam of light rose upward, curling softly like smoke, before sinking back into the ground. Elian stepped back, watching with wonder. The soil shifted. From it, a bud emerged. Small, fragile, and glowing faintly with silvery light. Its petals unfurled slowly, each one painted with the colors of dawn and the stars together. A new flower had bloomed, and it stood exactly where he had been lying. He knelt beside it. The flower's glow pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, gentle, calm, alive. When he reached out, the petals leaned toward his hand, as if recognizing him. He felt warmth travel up his fingers. Not heat, but something purer, like the comfort of a familiar dream. Memories flickered in that light. The whispers of the garden. Elira's kind smile. The lanterns rising across the lake of stars. The sound of laughter from the village. The silence of peace. He realized then, this was his dream taking root. His starseed now grown. So this is where I end, he whispered, and where I begin again. A soft voice drifted on the wind, faint, almost carried from beyond the veil of the sky. It was Elira. You've done well, traveler. You've remembered what it means to rest. Elian closed his eyes, letting the sound wash through him like music. Was the garden ever real? He asked quietly. Was. Then, a whisper that was both everywhere and nowhere. As real as peace can be. The wind grew still. The flower at his feet brightened, as though it had heard her words too. Elian smiled. A tear slipped down his cheek, not of sorrow but gratitude. He placed his hand over his heart and bowed his head to the bloom. Thank you, he said softly, for letting me dream. He rose and looked toward the horizon. The path stretched endlessly, sunlight spilling across it like liquid gold. The same road that had once led him to the garden now called him forward. But something inside him knew he would not walk it for long. His journey, the one that mattered, was complete. He took one last glance at the flower. Its light had changed, soft, steady, and infinite. As he began to walk away, a gentle wind swept across the hill, carrying the scent of the blossom through the air. Behind him, petals shimmered, floating upward, catching the morning light, rising like tiny lanterns made of dawn. They drifted higher and higher until they vanished among the clouds. And so the traveler left as quietly as he came, his footsteps fading into the breath of morning. But the world remembered. The garden remembered. Where Elian had stood, the single flower began to hum, faint at first, then strong. The sound spread through the earth, across meadows and forests, through rivers and mountains, until it reached a hidden valley cloaked in mist. There, within the heart of the star garden, the flowers stirred. Each glowing bloom lifted its petals toward the sky, as if greeting an old friend. A new light shimmered among them, pure, golden, endless. The caretaker, Elira, appeared among the blossoms. Her eyes softened as she saw the light spreading across her garden. "Welcome home," she whispered. And in the distance, the stars flickered, one of them burning just a little brighter than before. The flower on the hill continued to glow even as night returned. Its light never dimmed, never faltered. Travelers passing by would often stop, drawn by its beauty. Some swore they could hear faint whispers when they knelt beside it, voices full of warmth, laughter, and peace. And if they closed their eyes long enough, they would see flashes of stars and lanterns, of a garden where dreams grew wild beneath the sky. They would leave lighter, calmer, as if something unseen had touched their hearts. And every year when the stars fell, a few petals from that flower would rise into the air, drifting back toward the Valley of Dreams, the Star Garden, to join the others. The cycle continued, unbroken, eternal. When a heart finds peace, it becomes a seed. And from that seed, new dreams are born. So the traveler never truly left. He became part of the whisper, a quiet light among the eternal blooms. The wind moved through the grass again, soft and slow. The flower swayed with it, glowing faintly under the night sky. The moon rose, casting its silver glow over the land. From above, the stars blinked, one of them flaring for just a moment, as though winking in farewell. Then stillness. The valley slept once more. And beneath the stars, the flower kept its silent vigil, a promise made eternal.